Good morning, good morning, good morning. How's everybody doing this morning? Good morning. Hello, hello.
Good
Lots of
morning.
people. Wow.
Good morning.
I always give it a few minutes because I have stragglers who still can't get in, and I'll get a few texts, things like that.
Good morning.
So, good morning. Good morning. I'm sending off again just a few texts to people who don't have their link. So, let me just tell you, sorry, just getting everybody blinking. So, if you haven't met me, let me introduce myself. It's Dr. Pamela Janine Winton Turner. My Social Security card is like this long. So I'm old. I'll be 55 in 14 days. And I probably had my master's degree before many of you were even born. I got my master's in 91. I have never had an LMSW. I went to school in Florida, South Florida. And in South Florida, you don't have to have an LMSW. So I have an LCSW. And I've had that probably since you were born, 93. So long career. I went to private practice for a long time. Like most of my co-workers, I've had like 2 and 3 jobs at the same time, right? For the last 15 years, I've solely just taught. I work as a consultant for the school system, but I'm a full-time professor and I really just teach. So I love what I get to tutor. I love the fact that I work with amazing people. I love your stories. And as we start, I really would like to just take a moment of mindfulness. For me, this morning is just full of gratitude that I have the pleasure of working with such amazing people. And I'm really, really glad that I get to be here. And I think for you also, as I tutor, I always remind you that you are the very best social worker. And look around you. So, this is as good as it gets. If you're sitting for your LMSW and your LCSW, you're at the top of the heap. So remember that. And a mindfulness that you're really here. And most of my social workers that I tutor brought some baggage with them, right? I know none of you did because you are all just this amazing people. For me, and most of my students brought some baggage. And getting here wasn't an easy process. So just for a moment, look around, take a moment and breathe in that you are here, that you have reached this dream, and you're trying to get to another one. But you all have a master's, and they didn't give you that master's. And I know there were days I thought I had a brain tumor working on my doctorate. Like, oh my gosh, I just can't do this. I swear. It was before COVID, thank goodness, because IHOP was my best friend at 3 a.m. because I swear I had a brain tumor. So you made it. You made it. So at least for the moment, and I know you're worried about the test and all the stressful things that are on your life, but for this moment, pat yourself on the back. You're here. Yay! Proud of you. Very, very proud of you. So let me just tell you how today's going to go. I'm not recording yet, and I will tell you when I start recording. So I'm going to record. We're going to go over questions. There's 170 questions. It's a practice exam. I'm going to talk about how you answer the questions and what to look for in the questions. I'm going to talk about content, all those lovely things. So that's going to last probably about 2.5 to 3 hours so I can get through a good chunk of the questions. I will email you the questions as well. Actually, I take that back. Email me at the end of this. I'll put it in the chat box. So do not email me from here. Email me in the chat box. And I will, let me put that, open my chat box. So if you will send me your email to drpam2020@gmail, that is where I will send you the information from today as well as the video from today, okay? But what I'm going to do is I'm going to open a test. We're going to go over the questions. I'm going to ask you to try not to ask me questions. Get yourself there. Okay. So I'm going to ask you to try not to ask me questions until the very end. A lot of people are distracted by the questions when you ask questions. So I'm trying to accommodate all types of learners. So if you will, okay, so Galaxy, yeah, don't put your email in there because I will not do it from here. I'll do a mass email from my email. So send an email to my email. Does that make sense? Sorry. I do tutor like 75 people a week, and I have a full-time job still. I know. So anyway, so the way it's going to work is I'm going to open the test, and I'm going to go over the questions. I'm going to go over the rationales. So kind of write the number down if you're not sure why that's the answer, and I'll come back to it at the end. So the kind of goal is to get through as many questions as I can, and then I'll come back to the questions, and I will go over the ones that you didn't understand or you want to know why. So just write them down as we go along. And that way I'll get through a good chunk of the questions, and the people who don't necessarily want to stay for the rationales don't have to, but feel free to help me. I want to make you sure how you understand the question, okay? Help you understand why it's the answer.
Good morning, Dr. Pam. Can I ask you a question?
Of course. Am I recording? I am recording now. Let me stop that.
Oh, okay, sorry.
There we go. Sorry about that. Had to make sure I was recording. Okay, so again, this is my assessment model. Safety first, right? No doubt, ever. Safety, safety, safety. My safety, your safety, the client's safety. If the question says the client comes into your office and you walk into your office and the client is holding the chair handle and he's trying to beat you with it, you are not going to assess him, right? You're going to get out. You're going to call security. But in the questions, make sure it says that your life is in danger, or you feel like your life is in danger. Don't assume that. It may say that the client is belligerent and he is yelling and screaming. That is not a safety issue. That's an assess issue. High in feelings, I have to address feelings. So when you're looking at those questions, make sure that it really talks about that you are in danger, okay? So read the questions. The answers are in the stem. If I could tell you that a million times, the answers are going to be in the stem of my question, okay? If it's a recall question, when it goes to recall, then again, I'm looking for some clues up there, but if I can't find any clues, then I'm just going to compare them to each other, okay? So I usually get down to 2, and then when I get down to the 2 left, I go back to the question to prove it, or if not, I'm going to pick it up somewhere in one of my recall questions, right? Okay, so safety, 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 safety. Assess. Assess, assess, assess. Assess, 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 assess. Assess, assess. If I can say that enough, always assess before you intervene. If you've had me before, you know, you go to the doctor's office, and I tell him I have a headache, and he says, okay, Pam, by the way, I need you to come in for brain surgery, like, 2 weeks from now. Like, didn't you ask me a couple more questions? So whether it's a first question, a next question, or a best question, if there's anything I can ask again, that's what I'm going to do. I really want to make sure I have all the information before I make that decision. And that's what we do. We get paid to be nosy. This is our business. Who else can ask people how much money they have in the bank and did they feed their kids last night, right? My high school social worker, sometimes you ask them when the last time they pooped. No one else does that, but people like us. We get paid to ask those questions. So that is the goal, is to make sure we have as much information as we can. Then I'm going to assess. Assess again, assess again, assess again. You'll find very few questions that go down to the planning stage. When you are planning, you're going to plan with the client, not for the client. Okay, and when down the intervention stage, that's when you have to know whether your family strategy models, right? Those DSM questions, strategic or structural or systemic family. All of those things are things you're going to have to know when it comes down to there. Okay, termination, especially in those group questions, it talks sometimes about termination. We don't wait till the last minute to terminate ever. I teach my students termination starts at the beginning, but at least in the test, termination is a process, right? So you know when it's going to end, you know when things are going to happen, and the clients have a right to know also the termination is a process. We don't just wake up one day and, oh, by the way, we're done. Okay? And if I cannot assess you, or at any time during this process, it is high in feelings. I acknowledge the feelings. If I turned on my camera today and I was boo-hooing, surely somebody would have asked me if I was okay, right? So the question is high in feelings. You acknowledge those feelings at all times. We've got to acknowledge those feelings. Okay, so safety first. Again, make sure it is truly safety. When I go back to safety, so the question always comes up with abuse and neglect. Okay, be sure you read the question carefully. And this thing, I really think CYA, if a kid comes in and he says to you, my dad beat me last night, duh, I'm going to make sure that I call it in. Okay, if he's afraid, if there are marks and bruises, and if I've seen him several times, and several times he's had different bruises, and then he is very vague about his answer, I'm calling that in. If a child comes in, if the question says he is disheveled, he is hungry, his clothes are dirty, he's got some bruises on his knee, and he's 7, I'm going to assess. I'm going to wonder, maybe it was Dad's day to dress him, and I'm sorry for the dads in my class today, but maybe, Mom dropped him off at the bus stop, and he was supposed to get breakfast, or Grandma was supposed to pick him up. Let me assess first. We are known for resources. So on the test, you'll see that question sometimes. And what do? Social workers are best at? We provide resources. We build resources. That's the LMSW and the LCSW. That's what we do. So make sure that you understand those type of questions. That we're really not going to call in on this. Okay? But yeah, you've called the mother already, and she doesn't want to do anything. And of course, I'm going to call. That's what I'm going to do. So elderly abuse, also remember that, my elderly abuse, I'm looking for that the elderly person does not have control of their money. So if that's financial exploitation, or if she cannot care for herself. So if you go to the home and there's no food, or she hasn't bathed in a couple of days, that is lack of self-care. So we would always have to call those in also. Okay, so here, let me pull up some questions here. Okay, I'm using this today. I am going to use this one, and again, I will share a copy with this with you when I am done. You are more than welcome to. I think it's a really, really great little book. I think it's pretty close to the exam. I think it's hard. I think it's harder than some of the other ones I've seen. So I'm a really big fan of this book. So there's one at the master's level too, and I have that one if you'd rather prefer that one. When I just let me know at the end, or when you email me, let me know which one you'd rather have. But I really, really like this book. Okay, so. Oh, somebody is flushing their toilet. Mute yourself. We don't want to know what happened there. In my house, we actually often talk about it, unfortunately. Okay, so I'm going to start about midway through. This, like most of the question, the answer, the test, the test guides usually start with the easy ones first, right? So I try to start about midway through, and when you have this book, you can go back and you can start wherever you want to start. Again, it's up to you. So I'm going to start with 29. Can everybody see my screen? Yes, yes, yes.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Let me open my chat box to make sure if I get in the chat.
I can't see the question.
Yes, it's like partial screen, so it needs to move over some to see the whole question. It's being blocked off.
Being blocked off by
the bar. I'm trying to rearrange my bar for my photos, but it's.
So if it's, does everybody see it?
Yes.
Okay.
Now I do.
Okay, so if it's blocked out by something, it's probably on your phone. Just you can move it over. You can move my picture over. Is that a yes? We good?
Yep.
Yes.
Okie dokie, okie dokie. And again, so sometimes there's a pop-up or something, but that's on your screen. Just move it over either way. Okay. So, and I do use the old lady font. So if you're on a phone, sometimes that'll be harder to read. But I'm sorry, I need old lady font. You can read my phone across the room, my kids would say. I can like hold up my text and you'll know. Okay, so what can I say? 29. In describing domestic violence, the cycle of abuse is commonly framed in 4 phases. During the reconciliation phase, a perpetrator is likely to express all of the following except. So let me stop there. So this is a great question. However, the test only uses the 3 phases of domestic violence, not 4. Okay, so the test is only going to use the tension building, the battering incident, and then the honeymoon period. Okay, and what happens is as the domestic violence goes along, the cycle gets shorter. So there's a shorter period between the honeymoon and then the tension building, right? Okay, so and if you and this is again not a test question many times, but just social work information. So when we're writing safety plans with domestic violence survivors or people who don't want to leave, it's really okay to one of the things we tell them in the safety plan is to make sure that you're not in the bathroom, make sure you're not in the kitchen, things like that, because that's where you can really get hurt. Leave your keys in the car or things hidden so that you have a place to get out. Okay, so that wouldn't be on the test. But what would be on the test is having a safety plan, right? So you work with a domestic violence survivor. She's coming in, she's coming to the hospital. She says she doesn't want to leave, or she says, she's not sure. Then you work on a safety plan with her, right? Her choice, but we want to work on that plan. Okay, so during the reconciliation phase, a perpetrator is likely to express all of the following except. So, threats of further violence, blaming the victim for the abuse, apologizing for abuse, or minimizing the abuse. Okay, so the reconciliation phase would also be the honeymoon period. Okay, and you got it. So, and yes, thank you. You may answer in the chat box. If I didn't answer that. Yes, the answer is 29 is A. Okay, so he's not going to, there's no threats of further abuse. He's apologizing. She's apologizing. I'm very sorry. I didn't mean for that to happen. Okay, so those accept questions, again, you have to go back in and you have to kind of figure out which three are the right ones and which one is not. Okay, this one was a recall question. So there really wasn't enough in there to know the recall. There's not enough in there to follow the recall. However, there is enough that, one second, I sent somebody in. There's enough that I should be able to rule out just based on that material, right? Okay, 39. A husband finds his wife is drinking too much. She often apologizes and indicates she'd like to get help. Though she refuses to call and make an appointment, eventually he calls for her, sets up an appointment with the social worker. In exploring her drinking, social worker learns he does most of the shopping. He buys the alcoholic beverages. He reveals he purchases the alcohol to keep the peace. He's worried for the children. He's afraid she'll suffer from the DTs. His behavior is best described as what? Okay, so he's definitely my codependent, right? He's definitely my codependent. So you might also see the term enabler, right? He's enabling this to happen. So enabling in the community questions is a good thing. An enabler moves things out of the way to let things happen. So while we think of drug and alcohol use and we think about it in this question, we think enabler is not a good thing, right? But in the community, an enabler is one of the roles that social workers play, and it's okay to be an enabler. That's something that, again, we move things out of the way in a community situation. Okay. .33. Cultural competence in social work requires a salient understanding of and capacity with all of the except. A salient understanding. What does that mean? That just means a really good knowledge. That's all that means. Okay, you might see that question sometimes, but all that means is you've got a really great knowledge, great understanding of, and the capacity within all of the following except. Okay, knowledge of diversity, attitudes of accommodations, cultural skills, or group affiliations. So, sorry about that. Okay, so that is one of my accept questions. So 3 of those things belong and 1 of them does not. I'll give you a moment to think about that one. And again, you can post your answer in the chat box. I'm going to go over the answers, but you can post it if you want to. Okay. So 33 is group affiliations. Okay. So then cultural competence means I have a knowledge of diversity, an attitude of accommodation, cultural skills, but group affiliations is not necessarily making sure that I'm culturally competent. There's a difference between cultural awareness and cultural competence. Cultural awareness is that I'm aware that many Hispanics do this. I'm aware that it's common that, CP time, color people time, right? I'm aware of things like that. To be culturally competent means that I know how to speak with someone who's of a different culture. I do that without judgment. Even in my office, sometimes I'll make sure that I have magazines that are ethnically appropriate, that look like my clientele. That's cultural competence. Okay. We'll go back up to 32. When considering issues of cultural diversity, social workers must be sensitive to all the following except. So I just want to clarify the difference between race and ethnicity. You might see a question on the test that talks about one of the most controversial or the kind of debated things has often been race. So that kind of definition has gone back and forth of what race means. The accommodation, now the race is labeled by your phenotype. Your phenotype is what you see. Your genotype is what is the genetic piece. Okay, so my phenotype, what you see is you see my black skin, right? My genotype is the chromosomes, all those good things that make up my dark skin. So race, there are 3 races: black, white, Asian. That's it. Okay, can you be a combination of more than race? Yes, you can. However, your ethnicity or your culture is not always the same as your race. Okay, so racism is you don't like me because of the color of my skin. So as you've seen on CSI or any of those shows, they dig up the dead body and there's nothing left but the skeletal remains. Like, how do they know? They know because of the genotype, the genetic makeup, the bone structure, the facial structure. That's how that's known. That is my race. My ethnicity is then my ethnicity and my culture. I can use those synonymously. Get that out there. Okay, so make sure that we understand that. There are lots of people who look like me who don't speak the same language that I speak. There's people who look like me that are of a Hispanic descent. Okay, so make sure we understand that. So all the following except race and ethnicity, employment class, gender and orientation, or national origin.
God.
My employment, right, has nothing to do with my cultural diversity.
I'm extremely tired.
Somebody's not muted. And I'm sorry you're tired, but I need you to mute yourself. Okay, again, I'm in culture, okay? Working with a bicultural community center for the Southeast Asian family, a social worker encounters a family troubled by sharp divisions between older family members and their young children.
I paid for this. I'm too tired to even.
Somebody needs to mute themselves. Okay. So then, according to, and again, it doesn't matter who it's according to, Robbins, Chatterley, or in Canada, that doesn't really matter because we know is the racial, the racial identity model. And those are terms that you'll need to know. And my racial identity model talks about how we develop our idea of who we are. Okay. So this is in the APGAR book also. It doesn't look this way in the APGAR book. It just looks, it's in types and words, of course. But this is one of my favorite ones. Okay. So when it comes to racial identity, these are things that you would need to know. So this one talks about the development of different races. I think in APGAR, she just talks about the development of one, which is most often people of color. But this model does disseminate the models of different races of how we determine who we are. So pre-encounter, that is, so I still hear somebody. I still hear somebody. Okay. Thank you much. As you come in, if you could just remember to mute yourself, that just makes it easier for everybody else that's already in the room. Okay, so my pre-encounter happens for my children. I can tell you what it's like from as the mother of black children who've raised in predominantly white neighborhoods. The pre-encounters when my kids were little, they really had no idea that they were different than anybody else. We're from South Florida. It was a very mutually diverse neighborhood. There are people of all hues, people from everywhere, looked everywhere, lots of different religions. They didn't really get that they were different. So encounter is when something happens that you truly realize that you're not part of the majority population. So for my son, as he got older, the texture of his hair, right? The kids would feel the texture of his hair. For my daughter, I have 3 children. My daughter, she would kept getting pulled over while driving while black. And she's like, Mom, that's not true. I'm going to teach my children that as they realize who they are, being children of color, that the rules aren't always the same. So you have an encounter that you realize that you're different ethnically, you're different racially, okay? And so that therefore, you have to realize kind of who you are. And especially if you're the minority race in the majority population. So if you're white and raised in a majority black community, or it's a racial identity method. However, it could be used with a cultural identity as well. Okay, then you immerse yourself in the culture. You realize that I'm very proud of who I am, very proud of being African American. Then you internalize that. So that really makes it part of who you are. And then at that point, you live your life being very proud of who you are. But it's the racial identity method. So those are things that you would need to know again in this diversity chapter or in those sessions. There's this section on diversity. Okay. And then there's some terms that you need to know. Assimilation and accommodation. Do we know those terms? So assimilation is I look as similar as everybody else. So you will see that also. So most often you've got a child of color who, I'm sorry, let me back up, an Asian child sometimes, someone who is new to the area. And if an Asian child begins to dress very Western and look like everybody else, then he has assimilated. Okay, and again, this is the stage that has all the people of color, biracial, and white people. Okay, but the terms we're looking for is that assimilation is you look as similar as everybody else. So if a question says the kid comes home and he's a Japanese kid or an Asian kid and he begins to talk back to his mother, that means he's picked up those lovely Western attitudes, so he is assimilated. He's looking as similar as everybody else. Acculturation is when you add the culture to your culture. So if he dresses very Japanese at home, he eats very Asian dishes at home, but at school, he hangs out with the kids, dresses American, but at home, he still very much respects his parents. That is assimilation. Acculturation. He's acculturated these two together. Okay? Marginalization is when you don't have a culture at all. So then, an example for me is my son is stuck in Bali. They were over there with COVID. They got stuck there, and so he's born in America. He's lived in Europe for the last 5 years, and now they're stuck in Indonesia. So they're marginalized. They really live in the country, but they haven't adapted the culture of the country totally. But he doesn't really have his own culture right now because he hasn't lived in America or he was born American, but he hasn't lived here in quite a while. So that's marginalization. That's when you lose cultural contact with your own country as well as the majority. So you really aren't fitting in anywhere. That's marginalization. Okay. So to go back to this question, Okay, so go back and we're looking for the words to match the question, right? If I have no idea what the answers are. Okay, so I see a bicultural social worker, Southeast Asian family. Okay, so for this one, the answer is going to be, it is assimilation. It is assimilation, okay? The family is troubled by sharp divisions between older family members and their younger children. In particular, the parents' viewpoints of the children, they've lost respect. They've assimilated, okay? 37. All of the following are common characteristics of African American families except, okay, again, I am in the diversity area on the test. Those questions on culture and diversity. So these would apply to everybody, okay, my LMSWs and my LCSWs. So all of the following are common characteristics of African American families. So 3 of these things are, and 1 is not. The answer to that one is B, okay? Individual independence is diligently fostered. In tradition, most African Americans are very close. And it is, we grew up with mom and them. That's a term. So it's a very, very close. Okay, so we work together many times, not as collective as many of the other populations. We know that our Asian population and many of our Hispanic population, they're very collective. That means that what happens to one happens to all. So we look back at that Virginia Tech shooting where he was an Asian young man and he started shooting, where he was failing. So that you fail your entire family. Now, most of us, like if we don't like what our kid did, if our family's on the Busted magazine, we're like, yeah, that's that distant cousin, but it's not an offense to our entire family. With our Asian population, many times that is an offense to the entire family. Like, wow, can you believe that? So collectivism means that we do what's best for the community. Our Hispanic families are many times very collectivistic also, that we will live together, we'll support each other. So our viewpoint when it comes to our Hispanic families, most of us Americans, right, we'd rather have the big house with 2.5 children and be happy. We consider ourselves wealthy, right? We have the big house. Our Hispanic families are totally opposite. Our family, not totally opposite, but different. Our Hispanic families would much rather have the smaller house and they'd much rather have many children. That is a blessing. Many of our Hispanic families are Catholics, so don't believe in a barrier method of birth control. And in general, just see life differently than many Americans see it. So one of the fastest growing populations in the United States are my Hispanic children, okay? And Hispanic females actually live longer. So if you're looking at one of those questions on policy, we talk about food stamps. We know that our Hispanic children are, again, the fastest growing population. Being born in the United States, that allows the children then to qualify for food stamps, right? So the largest social welfare policy, social welfare program, the growing is food stamps. Okay, again, and our Hispanic population is the largest one growing. So one of my last students talked to me about machismo, and machismo was on the test she mentioned to me. And so machismo is, it is not, I'm the man, I will take care of everything. It really is about, I am the man, I will take care of everything. So if you're working with an Hispanic family, you probably know this from practice, working with a Hispanic family, many times the dad is the one who has to make the final decision. So we go to mom and mom was, I'll get back to you, or, and it's not that it's not that mom can't make a decision. It is the father is responsible for the decision made by the family. That is what machismo means. So look at 38. Characteristics common to many Hispanic Latino families include all of the following except. And again, I'm looking at those except questions. Okay. Now if you can see the 2 at the bottom. Okay. So patriarch family, the patriarchal family leadership is emphasized. That's my machismo. My dad's in charge. The family is more important than the individual. That's collectivism, right? We work together as a group. Personal problems are to be kept within the family, very much so. And the religion has no major role. Not true. We do know that, again, religion plays a huge part in many of our Hispanic Latino families. So D is the answer for that one. Okay. One of the things you might also see is my Hispanic families also need more rapport sometimes. So they may require more self-disclosure. So if you're having a session and, mom is asking you questions in that therapeutic situation, my LCSWs especially, my people, my Hispanic people may require more rapport before they're willing to share. Okay. So.
Question.
Yes.
In that question that was earlier that had, the answer was that group did not equate to understanding that population. I think about this question, and then I also think about my own personal experience. I think you would have a hard time understanding the Hispanic population without understanding Catholicism. Or if you took my Irish immigrant grandmother from Detroit, where she lived, it was Irish Catholic. If you didn't understand the Catholic, you wouldn't understand the Irish. So I have a hard time with that question because those two things are so integrated that there's no way you could understand that Irish population. I don't think most Hispanic populations you could understand if you didn't also integrate the Catholic.
I would agree. However, I don't know if you came in later or I didn't announce it. So we're going to hold questions to the end.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Okay, that's okay. And I love discussing it with you, but a lot of people just kind of want to know the answers and why. So I'm going to end the questions at probably, start at 9, probably about 11:30-ish. We'll stop the questions and then just really discuss them. So hold on to it, okay?
Hey, already.
And I agree with you, Craig. I totally agree. Okay, so then, where were we? Okay, so gay and lesbian community, 39. A social worker is working with a 22-year-old lesbian, a 22-year-old woman who is grappling with her emerging sexual identity as a lesbian. She expresses comfortable acceptance of her lesbianism and indicates meaningful support from her extended circle. Okay, and again, so when it comes to the researchers, Robbins, Chatterley, and Canada, you wouldn't have to know that. You do need to know the stages of coming out, though. I've seen those questions on the test. We know that the children, my teenagers especially, are at high risk for suicide as they come out. There's a very high correlation between my teenagers who are coming out and suicide. So that's often a test question. Okay. And so again, the most difficult step when it comes to coming out really is, so the answer for 39 is C, pride and identity. So the question is, even though she's revealed her sexuality to her heterosexual friends, she cites fears of rejection and saying she's embarrassed to take this next step. Okay, so the next step she would take would be pride and identity. So if you're not sure of those stages, let me pull those up for you. That's the coming out process. Okay, and just know that there are the stages of coming out. Okay, this is also in the APGAR book if you're not sure. So this is kind of one of those things. I haven't seen a question having to know all of those stages. I have not. Just knowing that it is a process to come out. So identity confusion, identity comparison, tolerance, then you accept who you are, then you have pride, then you integrate into the community. Okay, so those are the coming out processes. Again, so I'll send you this book and the processes in this book, but also just know it's in APGAR as well. Okay, so it is difficult. It is not just I come out one day, it's a process. Okay, so in the LGBT community, the term intersex refers to, and before you answer that question, again, let me give you information, make sure you understand. So we have gender dysphoria, right? That's a DSM diagnosis, gender dysphoria. That means that I am uncomfortable with the gender that I was assigned. Okay, so when I am, euphoria means happy, dysphoria means I'm not happy with that. So gender roles, gender has nothing to do with your sexual orientation. It is just what's between your legs. That is your gender. Your gender roles are what you do. Like boys do this, girls do that. Okay, so I was born, I have a vagina. and I feel like that I shouldn't have, I'm born a male and that my body part is incorrect, or I was assigned the wrong sex at birth, that is gender dysphoria. So I then can choose to live my life as a boy, a male. Okay, if I choose that, then I'm considered transgender. I believe I was assigned the wrong sex at birth. I am transgender. Once I have the surgery, then I become transsexual. Okay, so non-binary, you can choose not to pick a side. You can not be boy, not be girl. The pronoun is they, which I still don't understand. And I'm certainly not biased. I'm not, but I don't understand they. That just seems like to be inappropriate for grammar. That's the pronoun they. So again, that's gender. Transgender is before the surgery, transsexual is after the surgery. So look at 40. In the LGBT community, the term intersex refers to, and that is A. Okay, the old term used to be hermaphrodite, right? We don't use that term anymore. A couple of terms also when it comes down to sexuality, right? So my gender has nothing to do, my gender identity does not have to do with my sexuality. So if I am pansexual, that means that I love you, not based on your gender. I fall in love with people. I don't care if it's a boy or a girl. Okay, so that's pansexual. Transgender, sometimes that's also called bigender, things like that. So a couple of those terms, okay? But so you might get a question regarding who you sleep with or who the client sleeps with. So what matters is who they sleep with, not what gender they are. So if it is a woman who is now a male, okay, and she sleeps with women, that is still then a heterosexual relationship, right? That's what she presents at, how she identifies herself, and then who she has sex with. That determines, that's those type of questions. Okie dokie. And non-binary means I'm not choosing a side. Okay. 41, again, those are DSM questions, but I've seen those on both tests, my LCSW and my LMSW test. So no, that is gender dysphoria. Okay. 41, a 46-year-old woman has come with issues of complaints of depression, attempts at exploring the exploration of the underlying issues, revealing numerous outstanding challenges. Okay, I'll let you read those. Mute somebody. Okay, so then, it's just some of the terms that you may not know. Okay, so again, dysphoria, remember that's unhappiness. Okay, anhedonia, lack of pleasure. So if you remember hedonism, okay, that used to be one of those lovely islands and you went on with your honeymoon, so hedonism. Okay, so when you're looking at those terms, many times you can kind of put some things together. When I talk about homogeneous and heterogeneous, things that are homo are like. If you have a group that's a very homogeneous, they're a like group. Okay, hetero just means different. So again, when it comes to learning terminology and learning the vocab for the test, really time is kind of putting some of those meanings together. So this is a first question. So in my first question, I'm always going to try to see if I can assess, unless it's an imminent danger, right? So is there anything I need to look at for danger there? Okay. So if I didn't mention before, and I probably didn't mention before, the whole thing with medical, right? No, I missed the day in med school where I was supposed to be able to diagnose. I see those as assessments. So if a client comes in and the client has things that I think are medical, I always have to rule out medical first. Okay. In my mind, that's still assessing. Okay. Because she will assess her, the doctor will assess her, and many times she'll come back to me. So that's still part of that gathering more information. So a lot of people say, I see refer, that can't be it, that can't be it. But my first response is to make sure there's nothing medical going wrong. She's 46. There's some lot of things going on. Have the anorexia going on, impaired attention. Let me just make sure there's nothing else going on. Okay. And she also said she came in for what? Other than ventilation and support. What should I do? Ventilation is I'm letting her, share what's going on, and I'm supporting her. But then I also need to refer her to medical. So when it comes back to those also, let me make sure I clarify. So I see that as assess. It doesn't matter, and you can do it however if you see it rule out medical, either way. But to me, that's still assessing. If I see a question where I have a child who the cognitions, the thought processes, and the grades don't match, the IQ and the grades don't match, that's my first thought, is that child may have a learning disability, a learning disorder. There's those school social work classes, the school social work questions sometimes. I'm going to refer for psychological evaluation. That is evaluation of his thinking, his cognitions, his thinking process. Okay. Again, in my mind, that's still an assess question because I need to be able to find out what's going on. So the psychiatrist, if you refer to a psychiatrist, that is for meds, med checkup, right? You might see a question about a guy who's doing some really bizarre behavior, and I might refer to a psychiatrist on that, remember? And also that my psychological is for testing. So most often, I'm only going to use a psychological when I see a child. Now, you might see a question like that, but most often my psychological is just for the child. Okay. My MSE, my mental status exam, right? That's the one that I'm going to use at the moment. So if you've ever had a head injury, if you've ever hurt yourself and you were unable to, any kind of like car accident or anything where you've got a head injury, many times the doctors will use an MSE, the paramedics will use an MSE. If you're working at a mental health center sometimes, you're going to end up using a mental health, a mental status exam. So my MSC really looks at, sorry, my Siri was talking to me. Okay, so my mental status exam, my MSE is I'm looking at I'm going to make observations, right? I'm looking at I'm listening for their speech. Is it pressured? They're speaking like that. Eye contact, mood, my cognitions, your gait. Someone asked me, I saw that on a question, your gait is how you walk. So if someone has their gait is not straight, so many times that can be because they've been drinking too much, right? Or it could also just be that sometimes there's some injury there. So that's their gait. Okay, so then that's my MSE, and what I'm looking for are things that I can see. Okay, in an MSE, I'm not looking to diagnose them. This is going to be a short and sweet thing. And again, both my LMSWs and my LCSWs, many of you probably do this every day, is where you perform an MSE on your client. Okay, back to my question then, again, so that one I'm ruling out medical. Okay. Okay, 44, okay. A social worker is seeing a recently returned 26-year-old male military veteran. Look at 44. Okay, it's an accept question. Okay, so he has obvious symptoms of PTSD. Social workers should explore the possibility of all the following as a possible cause of these, except. And the answer to that one is B. Okay, discipline issues. So it could be combat stress. It could be sexual assault. Sorry, someone else is trying to get in. Okay. All of those things, but it would not be disciplinary issues. So just for clarification, when it comes to diagnosing, my PTSD, that is after 30 days, right? Prior to 30 days, Sorry, I'm texting someone else, set them in the group. Prior to 30 days, it is acute stress disorder, right? So prior to that is acute stress disorder. So 3 days to 30 days is acute. On the 31st day, it then becomes PTSD. Okay, that is most likely to be one of my LCSW questions. That's heavy in diagnosis. Okay. 445. The National Association of Social Workers established a clear position on undocumented illegal aliens. Okay. Illegal immigrants. I did not use that term, aliens. I apologize. Undocumented illegal immigrants. Okay. And the position includes all of the following except. Okay. Okay. Can you see D also? And I apologize. I am just sending the link to people who still need to get in. Okay, so for 45, the answer for 45 okay, is B. Okay, transitioning undocumented immigrants back to their homeland. We do not support that. Okay, and that's the NASW. And again, whatever your personal values or beliefs may be, you're a social worker, and our code of ethics says we don't support that. So as we talk about this, let's go ahead and pull up some social policies. So tell me, social policies that there's always a question about whether or not people who are illegal immigrants, people who are here illegally, can they get food stamps? Can they get Social Security? Can they get all of those things, right? And we hear from people who are not in our profession that those immigrants are coming over taking everything. Is that true? No, no, and no. Are there things that, yes, people can, you don't have to be born in this country? Yes, there are some things, okay? So I'm from Miami, I'm from South Florida, very, very large, migrant community, immigrant community. So lots of services, lots of services. We have food banks. We had the clinics, lots of things that are available for people who are not citizens. Okay. However, when it comes to those federal policies, my Social Security, right? My Social Security disability, all of those things, then no. WIC, if a pregnant woman is, if she is here and she's not a citizen and she's pregnant, she can get WIC, right? We'd like to keep our unborn babies really healthy. However, when it comes to the children being born, I mentioned already, the babies would qualify, of course, then for my food stamps. Okay. However, Social Security and Social Security disability, all of those things. So policy type, again, this is for everybody. When it comes to policy, Social Security. Social Security, I only get if I have worked at least 10 quarters, right? Someone just came in that I need to mute.
10 years, 10 years.
And he just muted me. Okay, so I have to work at least 10 quarters to be able to qualify to get Social Security. If I have not worked those 10 years, then I'd qualify for SSI, okay? So if you see a question about a young college student, someone who has never worked, and they hurt themselves, they qualify for SSI, that's supplemental income. Your Social Security is what you have paid in, so when you retire, then you will be able to get out. Or if you get hurt. My husband died 5 years ago. I draw survivor's benefits for my youngest daughter, right? He worked. Had he not worked, there would be nothing for us to withdraw from. So that's what you put in the pot. So that's why people who are not citizens, people who are not born in this country, or who are not from this country or have a Social Security card cannot draw anything. So that's federal dollars. Remember, my federal dollars, your federal building is totally separate. So that's your SSI, that's Social Security, your Social Security supplemental income, like $600 a month. That's really kind of barely enough for anybody to get on. So you're not getting rich off of that, right? So then those have, again, a separate building. Those are my Social Security dollars. So no, immigrants cannot get that. Sorry. However, then my food stamps, and if you're, again, if you live in a city where there are lots of, my WIC, and if you live in a city where there are lots of other services provided, then those are included. So if the question asks you, are there services? Yes, there are. However, they are not federal or state dollars. Okay, so just an overview again on policy. So the federal government gives each state money to decide how they want to divvy up their food stamps, Medicaid, aid for the poor, right? So federal dollars are federal dollars. That is things that you paid in, things you'll get out. That will never change. The federal building is separate. So, but this federal government also gives the states money for those other policies. So we have residual, those are the ones that we qualify for, means tested. I always tell my kids, how did you mean to pay for that? Means tested means how much income do you have, right? Okay, or how much do you own your house, do you own property, things like that. So that's why the guidelines are set differently in each state. And that's why the federal government gives each state the dollars. My state decides what the poverty level is in my state. They decide what Medicaid will pay for in my state, okay? So every state has different limitations of what Medicaid will pay for. I'm from South Florida. I moved up here and I saw kids with braces that Medicaid paid for. In my state that time, they weren't paying for that. So, but every state is different. Every state has the right to set that with their own state dollars, but it's funded through Medicaid or through the state. So Social Security is separate. Okay. One of the other things that's most interesting is might see a question on the poorest people in the United States. The poorest population is older Black women. And the rationale behind that is because people like my grandmother, when she worked for someone cleaning houses, doing domestic work, no one paid in her Social Security. So as she gets 80, there's nothing to pull out because there was nothing put in. Okay, so we do know our older African-American women are some of the poorest people. Okay, so that was just a question on policy. Residual, again, that term means that you have to qualify for that based on means. They're institutional welfare, things that we're not embarrassed by, right? You went to school on a Pell Grant or a Pell Loan, that was welfare, right? If you go to a public school, that's welfare. Public library, all of those things are things that our federal government, our state government pays for, but they are called institutional. So people, it doesn't come with the embarrassment that it does if you're getting food stamps, those residual things. Okay, so again, that's policy question. You might see some of those under policy. And the answer to this one, I talked about making sure that social workers do not support having anyone coming back. Okay. And again, not a test question, just some FYI for you, just information. So a lot of people also, not only will, if you're here illegally, that you don't want to, you won't qualify, but a lot of people who are here legally, who are applying for, who've lost their jobs, and they do have the proper requirements to work in this country, many times will not file for unemployment, will not file for food stamps. Because if you're trying to seek American citizenship, America wants you to be able to afford to pay for yourself, right? So we think we're not going to take you on if you can't afford to pay for yourself. So even if you're here legally and you've lost your job, many of that population is still very, very, having a really hard time because they're not going to apply for anything because their goal is to become American citizens. Something we so much take for granted, right? Even days when we're not always proud to be an American. Okay, so. Number 46, during an intake interview, key areas of data collected include all of the following except. So we're doing an intake interview. What is something that I might not want to collect? That is C. There are very, very few questions about payment. The only question you'll see is the code of ethics, right? where the code of ethics says that if a client can't pay me, I just turn them away, right? Adios, have a good life. No, it doesn't. What it says is that we're going to come up with a payment agreement, right? If I'm charging $2.25 an hour, my LCSWs, that's you guys soon, charging $2.25 an hour, and the client says he lost his job and he says I can't pay that anymore. And I said, well, okay, what's $175 an hour? We both agree to that, and then if he does not follow through, I have the right to terminate him as long as he's not in danger. So if he comes to my house or comes to my office and tells me he's going to kill himself, I have to keep him, right? But please understand, pro bono does not mean giving these sessions for free. Okay? Pro bono in the code of ethics means if there's a public emergency, if your school needs someone to come speak on bullying, that's what that means. That myth about social workers being poor, no, that is anywhere in the code of ethics does it say that. We don't give our services away. So if the client cannot do that, we refer him to mental health. That's really okay. That's not a bad thing. So the code of ethics does not address that we give our services away for free, other than that pro bono where it mentions at the end of the code of ethics. And again, you are supposed to, in a community disaster, anything like that, you are supposed to go out and give your services. Okay? So while I'm here, I'm going to go ahead and discuss that crisis intervention method. Okay, this also is in the APGAR book. Okay, doesn't look like this, but that crisis intervention model, this is one of the questions where you'll have to know the steps. So there are 6 steps to crisis intervention. Okay, and remember, when you're doing crisis intervention, you're going to see the word crisis in question. It'll say the family's in crisis. There's a crisis going on. It'll tell you. Go back to the STEM, read in STEM. It'll tell you there's a crisis. The assumption is I will never see these people again. Never, 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 never. That's the assumption. So the goal is to get in, get out, help this person, and then go back to my regular life, and they'll have someone else to see them. So on the test, you're not going to ask any questions about childhood. We don't care what happened to their childhood for this. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to plan and conduct a biopsychosocial assessment. That is short and sweet. That is not like please tell me your father's last name. No, it's more of a lethality. Is everybody safe? So again, this is something that everyone's supposed to use. It was developed after the many school shootings, all the crises that were happening in our countries. This is when it was developed, right? So social workers, psychologists, doctors, everybody's supposed to follow the same crisis plan. So when you get there, everybody knows what to do. So again, I'm going to do an assessment. Are we safe? So if it's a school shooting, are we in an area that we can be safe? Is it someone who is suicidal? Are they safe? Second, I'm going to establish rapport quickly. Hi, I'm Dr. Pam. I am part of the crisis team. We're here to get you guys out. Okay? 3, I'm going to gather as much information. Sometimes I've seen the question last straw. Sometimes I've seen just gather more information. I want to gather as much information about the incident that happened, right? What did you see? What did you hear? Anything. I'm trying to gather as much information before I let 4 happen. And 4 is I'm going to ask them how they feel, right? Once 4 happens, we've lost it. Right? I've lost it. When you let me emote, I've lost it. Get as much information as I can before you let me cry. Okay? I'm going to then, stage 5, it says, explore your untapped resources. I'm going to ask them, so, is there someone you can call? Who's your support system? Have you survived something similar? What did you do last time? Then I'm going to develop an action plan, which most often is already developed. So I'm going to say, follow up with your EAP person. The crisis team will be out tomorrow, whatever I need to do. And the follow-up and plan, most often in the real world, I'll give them my business card and I'll just say, if the crisis team doesn't contact you, here's my number, we'll get you in contact with the crisis team. Not with me. The assumption in a crisis is I am just there for that moment, I'm stepping out, and then I'm leaving. Okay? So that is my crisis intervention model. Again, it is in the APGAR book. It just doesn't look this way. I think TDC also. Again, it's a visual. I like visual, so that's why I do this one. Okay. And you will know that. You'll know that because of the question. Okay. Again, I'm in interviewing, so that's where these questions are at. So 48, in the clinical setting, a social worker is asked to assess clients based on their complaints, deficits, and identified problems. The method of assessment draws upon which of the following assessment models? The strengths perspective, medical model, biopsychosocial model, or none of the above? 48 is that medical model, okay? So when we are using solution-focused LCSWs, strengths-based, that's the only one that does not follow the medical model, okay? So my solution focus is very short and sweet and to the point, okay? It starts off with the solution. The solution method uses the miracle question, right? Stephen DeShazer and what's his wife's name? Something, I don't remember her name. Didn't matter their names. But so the solution focused, short and sweet. Start off with the solution. That's where I get the miracle question. If you wake up tomorrow and the miracle happened, how would life look different, right? You guys remember that from school back in the day? Okay. This is, again, not necessarily one that you would see on the LMSW, but when those who eventually will take the LCSW, that is not a medical model. It is taking the strengths perspective. It is looking at the positive. It is the only therapy that doesn't start off with the problem. It starts off with the solution. You'll see the scaling questions, 1 through 10. So if we're putting it in a term that you can see, so if the miracle happened tomorrow, what would it look like? And then you scale 1 through 10. Let's say the miracle happened. Where are you at today? So again, not the medical model. That is the only therapy that does not use the medical model. Okay. Okay, 52. Once I go with the medical model, let me just go back and I'm going to touch on drugs and alcohol because there's always a couple of questions on there as well. So just a couple of things I want to touch on. So when it comes to drug and substance abuse, social workers believe in the medical model. We believe that it's an illness the same way it is diabetes. We treat it as an illness. Okay. So DTs, my delirium tremors, that is the only drug, the only one that does require hospitalization if someone's withdrawing. Okay, if I have someone who's an addict, who's a true alcoholic, the delirium tremors are the shakes, right? And if my body is so used to having, if my body is so used to having, you know, that alcohol in my system, I can't just withdraw cold turkey. I will die. So opioids, my drugs, my medication, my prescription drugs, as well as heroin, okay, that is uncomfortable. It's like an awful, awful flu and you'll wish you'll die, but you will not die from that. So for the test, when you see those alcohol and drug questions, do know that my alcoholics, they do have to then be hospitalized. You can die. Antabuse, A-N-T-A-B-U-S-E, antabuse, okay, that is the patch or the pill that someone would take who's an alcoholic. It is an aversion therapy. You will throw up afterwards if you drink alcohol. Okay, so that's an aversion therapy. So most today now it's the patch, but it used to be the pill. And the best time the person stays on it until they can stop drinking. That is that simple. Now, the harm reduction method, many people need to know as well. So the harm reduction method follows more of the line of how social workers believe. The harm reduction method says that we're not going to take the medication. We're not going to make you be sober. We're going to help you use your drug of choice safely. I've seen a question that there's a mother who is a drug user. She's an alcoholic and she's working with her social worker and she wants to go and party and blah, blah, blah. And the question was, you know, the question asked, using harm reduction, what approach would you take? And the answer was, you know, get her, help her make sure she has a ride home. Okay, harm reduction says that clients have always used, clients will always use. It's always been in the world. So sobriety isn't the only answer. So I'm going to help them use their drug safely. Clean needles, harm reduction. Okay, so things like that. That goes against our code of goes with our code of ethics of client self-determination. So while in the drug treatment world, it is still very much debated. It is something that social workers, many times with code of ethics at least, says that we believe in. So that is those self-harm, self-reduction methods. DUI is harm reduction. DUI doesn't say don't drink. DUI classes say, don't drink and drive. Okay, so just making sure you understand that. I think that's pretty much it. You know, when it comes to uppers and downers, pot is not a stimulant. You know, I was going to go to work, but I got high, right? So my cocaine, Adderall, things like that, those are my stimulants that you might see on the test. Again, my opioids, we use methadone or Narcan to, methadone or naltrexone to treat my opioid addicts, okay? And then in my, pull that up for you. And then Narcan you might see. So Narcan is the medicine that stops it immediately. So it prevents the opioid overdose immediately. So there's lots of controversy in the beginning when it first came out because it was expensive and whether or not the ambulance drivers would even carry it. But if someone is suffering from an opioid overdose to save lives, Narcan, that's Narxolone is the brand name, but Narcan is the one that you would use. Okay, and you might see that also on the test, especially my LCSW test. You might see that one. Okay. Okay, I'm going to take the time just for a question. So when it comes to drug and alcohol, anyone who's taken the test before want to share anything else regarding drugs and alcohol that you may have seen on the test? AA is not a faith-based group. If you see a question about that, 12-step groups, AA groups are not faith-based. So if you see a question about a client who says that he doesn't believe in God, you would still send him to AA. The AA concept is belief in God as you know him. Okay, so not as I see God, it can be a mountain, a tree, or whatever. In many areas, of my area especially, it happens to be held in the churches. However, it is not a faith-based one. Okay, anybody? There's always a few of those questions. Anybody else see any questions about drug or alcohol?
I have one is, and I may not be pronouncing it correctly, but it's Wernicke's syndrome.
Oh, yes. So the Wernicke is a part of your brain in general. So if we know our Wernicke area, so Wernicke's is in Korsakoff. So that is what you get if you drink too much. It literally is water on the brain. And that's what you need to know for the test. In the real world, what happens is you cannot absorb vitamin B. I think it's B. So that's why it happens. So that's my Korsakoff syndrome or Werner's encephalopathy. Okay, and it literally means water on the brain. Okay, so that's that wet brain. So Wernicke's or Korsakoff, you might see that. Thank you, Linda. Okay, so that is my wet brain. Okay, you might also see a question about fetal alcohol babies. Okay, so if you see a question on that, fetal alcohol babies definitely have a different facial feature. Okay, and that's most often the question I've seen about that is knowing that their facial features are very different. Okay. Okay, so lower nasal bridge, middle ear abnormalities. Most often you're going to see the eyes are not set apart. There's a difference in the upper lips. So if you see a question like that, which birth defect that is drug related, alcohol related, that is my fetal alcohol syndrome. So I do see that on the test. You all know that we cannot report on a baby that is not born. If mother is a drug and alcohol user, okay, and she tells us all day, my answer is until she has a social security card, that baby don't count. Okay, so, and I'm not against your values, I'm just saying for the test, until we can bill for her, she doesn't count. So remember, you do not call in on an unborn child, right? We don't do that. So child is born, and then you work in the hospital social worker, and the child is born, that's a different story. But when the child is not born yet, you cannot do that. Okay. So again, while I'm here, let me just go on some of my neurocognitive and neurodevelopmental disorders. But sometimes those 5 A's of Alzheimer's. Anybody seen those on the test? Ataxia, apraxia, all of those. Okay, so you'll see those sometimes. Those are the 5 A's. So I always remember, it's called the 5 A's, and sometimes there'll be some different ones that you'll see. I'll put those in the chat box. But those are in APGAR also. Okay, so what I'll see is, make those bigger. This flyer's on my Facebook page if you want to pick it up later. Okay, so apraxia and ataxia. I try to remember both of those. So if it's the AP and the AT, those have to do with mobility. My apraxia, I'm misuse of objects, or I'm not using my fork right, because I'm not sure what it was. Ataxia is my gross motor skills. I always remember I can't catch the taxi because I have ataxia, because I can't, it's a gross motor. Apraxia is like I can't use the fork appropriately. Okay. Anomia, inability to remember the names of things. Agnosia is I can't remember familiar objects. If you put a PRO in front of that, I can't remember people's faces. Aphasia, aphasia is speech. I don't recognize speech. Okay, I'm sorry, I can't share the speech. So aphrasia. Okay, so those are in APGAR, and usually I've seen one of those on the test. So those are the 5 A's. Those are the 5 A's of Alzheimer's. Okay, ataxia, apraxia, those are my motor. My ataxia, like I can't run. My apraxia, I can't use my fork right. Okay, so aphasia has to do with phases. Agnosia, phrases. Aphasia is phrases. Okay, amnesia, of course, is just general memory loss. And my agnosia, I can't remember objects, the name of objects. If you put a PRO in front of that, propagnasia, I can't remember, I don't recognize people's faces. Okay, they'll look familiar. We've seen those somewhere before. Nod of a head, yes, yes. You know what those are? Yes. Okay, you've seen some of those on the test most often. Okay, so when it comes to my neurodevelopmental disorders, right, my neurodevelopmental disorders are things that happen in utero, right? So according to the DSM, you'll see some of those. My neurodevelopmental are things that happen when I am born. Those would be what? Cerebral palsy, Down syndrome, yes, yeah, okay. So those are things that yes, okay. So then my neurodevelopmental, again, childhood disorders, okay. So then as I look at then, those are, as my brain is developing, that's my neurodevelopmental. So then my other category then is the people who have issues with Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, dementia, okay. So the neurodevelopmental ones, of course, are the ones that happen as I am developing. My neurocognitive, for the DSM, they're now put into 2 categories, minor and major and mild. Okay, so you can have dementia, a mild form, you can have Alzheimer's, a mild form, or you can have the major form. Okay, those are the ones you'll see as you get older. Okay, so to this one. 57. A social worker is seeing a married couple at times individually. During an individual session, the husband reveals that he is bisexual. He also reveals a lengthy history of sexual liaisons with men and discovers that he has recently learned he is HIV positive. Okay. He inquires, the social worker discovers he has not disclosed HIV status to his spouse and that he does not use any barrier protection methods with her. Barrier protection means a condom. Okay. Upon explaining the life and death risk to his wife, he still maintains he won't change his behavior. He minimizes the risk. After a lengthy conversation, he remains unwilling to reveal his HIV status or to use any protection. What do I do next? This is a code of ethics question. Okay, so the answer is going to be D, and it might also say based on your jurisdictional guidelines. Okay, so that's always the answer for the test. The Code of Ethics clearly states that is based on your individual guidelines. The NASW, the social workers there's not been a case that's gone to the Supreme Court. That's the bottom line. So to decide whether or not this is a life-threatening illness, because everyone who sleeps with someone who has HIV doesn't necessarily get AIDS, right? So whether it's a life-threatening illness or not is how we decide whether or not you should tell. So right now you cannot tell. It's very interesting. I teach the LPC, that code also. Their code has recently added, if you think the person is in imminent danger, you may have a case, you may have a reason to share. Okay, so again, there's nothing that's protecting us right now should this case go to court. So at this point, you're going to follow your jurisdictional guidelines, follow your agency guidelines, somebody else's guidelines, and if you're going into private practice, develop your own guidelines. Because you do not want to lose this license that you have worked so hard to get by violating one of the, someone's confidentiality, right? Okay, so depending on the state. I do think we're going to see some changes with this in the next couple of years. I think, it takes about 7 years to go from research to actually putting into practice. So we've got to figure the stuff on COVID, research on COVID, real facts, probably won't happen until COVID ends, right? And then as we do research, it's going to be at least 7 years before it comes into practice. So probably again another 7 years before it even affects the Code of Ethics. But I do think that we'll see COVID and those type of diseases also. So now, if someone coughs on you, they have COVID. What do you do? So I do think that's something that will be addressed also as a social worker. So that's part of what we do. So, but not yet. Right now, it is just making sure that you know what happens in your state. Okay. Still, we're still on some of these kind of assessment techniques. I asked about the MSE earlier. I explained the MSE earlier. So 53. The MSE, the mental status exam, covers all the following except. Answer for that one is 53. That was A. It is A. 53 is A. Addictions and compulsions. Okay. 56. In determining the degree of severity of intellectual disability, the most important determinant is, it's the A's or IQ score, B, adaptive functioning, C, intellectual functioning, D, deficits in the person's responsibility. We can go back to that one. That one is 56. Okay. And it is the deficits in the person's responsibility. Is that right? Mild. No, that's not right. Okay. In determining the severity of an intellectual disability, the most important determinant, the severity of their disability. Okay. That is then their, hold on, let me see that. Okay. So their adaptive functioning. That is correct. That is B. Their adaptive functioning. Okay, so my IQ score can be, very low, but depending on how I function, really is we're looking at that in terms of severity of it. So 100 is an average IQ, right? That's average. 123-ish is gifted. 143 is like Mensa material. Those really, really, really smart people. Below 70 puts me in the mild to mentally retarded. And I haven't seen a test go further down than that. Okay, but that is below 70 is when I'm concerned. When it comes to instruments, we see this also. Which instrument do we use to test IQ? All right, there's a couple of those. So the one that most often for children is going to be my WAIS. It is my WISC, my WISC. That is for children. Okay, the WISC is for children under the age of 16. So 6 to 16, you get the WISC. Okay, adults 16 and over, you get my WAIS. The A, again, that's, it's my adults, that's my WAIS. My WIPSI, I remember they're the ones that beep on themselves. That is my WIPSI, okay? So WAIS, adults, WISC, children, 6 to 16, WIPSI, 3 to 5. You'd use a WIPSI for someone who's trying to get their child into preschool early, okay? So those are the ones. So if the question says you're looking for the intelligence test of a kid who's under the age of 16, which one would I use? I could use my WISC. Okay. So those other things that you're going to see on there, my MMPI is not a question of how nice you are. My MMPI is a level of you're crazy. It is called the personality inventory. There are 556 yes or no questions. The goal is that you'll be able to pick up if a person is being dishonest. Okay. I like mechanics magazines. I have a good appetite. I often have diarrhea. It's called forced choice. You wouldn't see it on the test, but it's called forced choice, where you have to answer yes or no. And if you've ever seen this given, if you've ever used it yourself, the person is giving it to you quickly. I like this, I like that, I like this, I like that. And you're supposed to answer yes or no. The goal is to pick up some things that are hidden in your personality. So it's a personality disorder checklist. That's what we're looking for. Okay. Again, 556 questions, and there are like 10 subscales. Are you paranoid? Are you too feminine, too masculine? Are you schizophrenic? Do you have traits of schizophrenia? Not schizophrenia the symptom, but traits of schizophrenia. So that's what those are looking for. So that is my MMPI. That is the oldest test we have. And there's like 5 different versions on the test. It doesn't matter. They're not looking, do you know which version does what? All they want to know is, what is an MMPI? Okay, it is a personality scale, but it is not a definition of how nice you are. It is looking for deviations, really bizarre things in your personality. We still use this many times for the police department. We'll use it for military high-ranking officers, and we use it for like Navy SEALs, things like that. We still use this test, MMPI. Okay, so the one that most often is going to test your personality is my Myers-Briggs, right? So my Myers-Briggs is the one you get those. There's 16 choices and you get 4 letters. Okay, my Myers-Briggs. Okay, so you're an extrovert, you're an introvert, you are sensing, you are intuitive, you are thinking, you are feeling, okay, perceiving and judging. Oops. Okay, so that's my MBTI, Myers-Briggs type inventory. I've used this personally with like people who was doing marriage counseling with. Many times you probably took it when you were in school to get used to it. I love this, and it is LMSW, LCSW. If you're working with somebody, you can use this. You can most often find a free one on the internet. If not your company or you're in private practice, you'll buy it. I think it's a really great tool, really, to just kind of let, especially for couples who are dating, to get to know who they are, their personality. And it's an assessment you go through and you figure out who you are based on that assessment. Okay. I know you're not surprised, but I'm very E. I'm an extrovert. How do I take my information? I am very intuitive. I don't do well with the fine details. I'm also, when it comes to making my decisions, I'm a feeler. I make decisions with my heart. No, that works out so well all the time. And then also then I am, when it comes to how to prefer to guide my life, I'm not a judger. I'm very much a perceiver. Again, you can find a free one on the internet if you want to do it, but that's your MBTI. And the other one you often will see is your TAT. That is your thematic appreciation test, and that's something you might see along with the Rorschach. That's the black and white photos. Those are from Freud. Okay, so and on the test again. So especially my LCSWs. Anytime you see psychodynamic, psychoanalytic, unconscious, that's Freud, right? Freud, 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 Freud. Defense mechanisms are from Freud. They're unconscious, except for one, which is suppression, right? Okay, so Freud would ask you to tell me a story about one of these pictures. He'd give you 20 of them, and he would just say, so tell me a story. And he'd use those to determine what was hidden in your unconscious, because according to Freud, everything was in your unconscious, right? Okay, so this is, again, this is the thematic appreciation test. You might see TAT, and you might see the words. It's thematic appreciation test, okay? And that's what you're looking for. Okay, those are subjective and projective. You're projecting from your unconscious. You're projecting onto, these feelings onto the picture, and then Freud would tell you what that meant. Because you're an idiot, you woman. Freud knew everything, and women were idiots. The other one he would use would be my Rorschach. Okay, that's my inkblot test. If you are new with me, you will know. If you're not new with me, I always see vaginas. I'm sorry, maybe because I teach this all day, every day, but that's all I ever see. Okay. And yes, I'm single, but I don't know. But so, to me, it looks like if you cut me, like you cut me across, like at my waist, what you would look down and see. So I see like, you know, the labia and maybe the thighs and my uterus like there. But Fro would have a field day with me. But in general, it really looks at what do you see in this picture. So here again, and those are subjective, his opinion. Okay, so he would tell you to, in your unconscious, look down and then tell you what you see, right? That's Freud. That is my ink blot or the Rorschach. That's what I'm looking for. Okay, so those are the major ones that you'll see on the test. My IQ scores, again, are about 100 is average, and those are the other test examples that you'll see. And you'll usually see one of those always on the test. As a social worker, you should know what these major instruments are. Okay. Okay, let's look at 59. Some simple diagnoses here. Parents bring in their 14-year-old son concerned about his persistent, rebellious, disobedient, and arguing behavior. The problem has just been getting progressively worse over the past year, and it's not tolerable. And if you get questions this long on the test, you only have to score 99, by the way, or the lower one. So, you know, we have two versions of the test, or several versions of the test. The lower the score you need, the more verbiage. Okay, so it's not the questions are any different. There's just more words. The vignettes are longer. So the higher the score, the less wordage, the less verbiage, the less words in your vignettes. So if you get one, you're thinking, oh my God, I've never seen this many words. Most often that's going to be the indicator of only needing a lower score. Okay, so then there's no evidence of drug abuse, nor does he appear to be a victim of bullying or any other thing in the home. He's constantly argumentative, angry, overly touchy, and refuses to behave. He ignores family rules and refuses to perform basic household chores. What diagnosis do we think that sweet little boy would have? So for this one, I'm going to give that little boy an ADD, right? Okay, because, I'm sorry, ODD, oppositional, I apologize, ODD. The answer is A, ODD. Okay, so with my conduct kids, I'm looking for kids who are mean, kids who break the law, kids who poke the dog's eye out and have no remorse. My opposition defiant kids, they are a pain in the butt. They will throw a chair at you. They will, they might even like wreck the classroom. But the intent is not to hurt the teacher. The intent with my conduct kids is to hurt you. They want to hurt you. Have to be diagnosed between the ages of 6 and 13. Sometimes my conduct disorders I've seen up to 15, but the difference in those questions is the conduct disorder kids are the ones who are out to get you, right? So my conduct disorder, untreated, when he turns 18, he is diagnosed with
antisocial.
Antisocial, you got it. So my antisocials are not people who are just not friendly. That's called asocial. Antisocials are my Jeffrey Dahmers of the world. Those are the people that will kill you and eat you and blame you. Okay? So some of those personality disorders, remember, they are ingrained. They've been that way their whole life. I've always been that way, and I'm always going to be that way because it's a personality disorder. Back in the day, we used to put those on Access 2 because an Access 2 was what people weren't presenting with. And now we don't have any access, and somehow that's still on the questions of the test sometimes. We no longer have the 5 accesses. We don't have the GAF either, the GAF. We now have the WHO DAS, which is the World Health Organization, okay? But, so when it comes to the DSM diagnosis of personality disorders, though, we do know personality disorders, they do not come for treatment. And that term, of course, is egocentric, right? Things that are egocentric are things that are in sync with who I am. Okay, so things that are uncomfortable, I'm going to come for treatment. Ego dystonic, I don't like this. Those are all of my other disorders except for anorexia. Anorexia is egocentric because my anorexics always think they're too fat, right? But my egocentric So that is in sync with my ego. Those are my personality disorders. I am not coming for treatment because it is not my fault. I've always been this way. Okay, ego dystonic, I'm coming, I don't like this. All personality disorders, you're not diagnosed until you're 18. So when you're seeing those questions on the test, make sure you look for an age. You got to be at least 18, right? Okay, and then I take that back. Borderlines, and again, I haven't seen this on the test yet, but we do diagnose borderline personality at about 16. Okay, so that is one of the ones we don't have to wait till they're 18 to diagnose, just so you know that. But then they're all ego symptomatic. Now, borderline is not going to come in and say, oh, please help me. Borderline is going to come in and say, hi, you're the best therapist ever. Oh my gosh, I have seen 17 therapists before you, and you're the most amazing one ever. And she's going to swear that you're the best thing ever in life. And then you're going to do something and she won't like you anymore. And you'll never see her again. You know, for unstable relationships, okay, back and forth. They are very hot, very cold, splitting. Those are terms that you'll see with that borderline personality disorder. And again, these are more for my LCSWs when it comes to diagnosing, okay? So the treatment for those borderlines happens to be what? DBT, okay? And again, that you might see this one on both the tests, but DBT, that is where mindfulness came from, and that is what we use to treat our borderlines. That is that DBT, dialectic behavior techniques. That has to do with making sure that we talk about emotional stability, emotional being able to regulate their emotions. Many of you probably use DBT in your real world. It's pretty common with children as well. Okay, but this is a treatment of choice for my for my borderlines. Mindfulness, emotional regulation, distress tolerance, and interpersonal effectiveness. Okay, so that is DBT, dialectic behavior therapy, and you'll use that with your borderlines. Okay, children also in the real world, but I haven't seen that make the test with regards to children. Okay, ADHD, of course, you know, that's my attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. That is the one drug that has a paradoxical approach. The term paradoxical means opposite. So if you see the question on the test, which medicine has a paradoxical approach? It's going to be my Concerta, my Adderall, my Ritalin, all of those things act the opposite way. So someone who has ADD and they're up and they're up and they're up, ADHD, they're up and they're up and they're up, then I'm going to give them a stimulant with a paradoxical effect and it brings them down, right? Okay, so the paradoxical approach that we use is ADHD. Also for my LCSWs, we do diagnose adult ADD now, or adult ADHD. So no, that is on the test. So if you see an adult who's got the same behaviors that you would see in a kid, we do have adult ADD and adult ADHD. Okay, and my bipolar disorder, guys, that's my bipolar 1, bipolar 2. My bipolar 1, that's the one where you're off the chart for 5 full days at least. And many times those 5 full days end you up in the hospital or in a jail cell someplace, right? The treatment of choice for the test is still most often lithium. Lithium does cause toxicity. It causes a buildup in your system and you can die of too much lithium. In the real world, we are now using Depakote and Tegretol. Those are anti-seizures. So if you do not see lithium on your test, you're looking for an anti-seizure, okay? So Depakote or Tegretol. My bipolar disorder, again, 5 to 7 full days of a full-blown manic attack. She stole her brother's car. She went and slept with 17 other men, and she went on a shopping spree. You haven't slept for at least 5 days. In order to have that bipolar 1, though, I had to have at least a major depression first, okay, or in that cycle. So most often, I've got to have at least that major depression. That's 2 full weeks, right? 2 full weeks of can't get out of bed, can't do anything, can't sleep, want to kill myself. 2 full weeks. Often in the question, you'll see the person had 2 weeks of this awful stuff. We put them on medication. They stop the medication because suddenly she gets way up, okay, and then she gets up and up and up and up. So that is what I'm looking for bipolar 1. Okay, bipolar 2, I only have to have 1 episode of this depressive cycle, 1. And then my hypo is less, my hypomania, okay, and that's going to last for less than 4 days. I'm still treating that the same way. In a hypomania, you might not even notice that. You might not even realize the person is having manic episodes. In a bipolar 1, you will know. You will know, you have no doubt. Cyclothymia is one in the dark purple. Cyclothymia, it lasts at least 2 years. So it has the lower, but you're still not normal. See, the normal mood swings are in the green. That's my average person. We all have like, oh, life is good. I'm taking the test. Life is bad. This happened. Things like that. However, in my bipolar, in my cyclothymia, the cycles are still higher, and they last for at least 2 years. Okay, so those are differential diagnoses of how to tell those. And again, those are mainly for my LCSWs, but you will see, you've often seen some bipolar questions when it comes to the LMSW as well. Okay, we'll close out some of my 1,000 windows here. Okay. Number 60, again, we're diagnosing still. Okay, so if we look at this long vignette, it's number 60. She's at the medical clinic. She's called in to evaluate a 15-year-old girl. I'm going to read that. She's eating things such as clay, mineral oil, sand, obvious reluctance to talk about this. And she says things like, I just don't know. It's been going on for 6 months. She is 15. So I am thinking that most of you think this is pica, right? I'm going to tell you that this is anorexia. Go back to the question. Okay, so we're trying to evaluate a 15-year-old girl who admits to persistent eating disorder of paper products. The girl is persisted for 6 months, and the key is it is led to substantial weight loss. That was the key. She's 15 with substantial weight loss. So while she is eating things that are not food, that would normally be considered pica, the fact that it's led to extreme weight loss makes it anorexia. Okay, so yes, pica is eating things that are not food. Most often, pica is going to be with someone who has mental retardation. That's what we associate it with when they're eating things that are not food. Okay, so she is eating, look what she's eating: clay, mineral oil, sand, and ice chips. So when you see that question, be sure you go back to the question to make sure you know what you're looking for, because this one was not pica, it was anorexia. So when it comes to, again, my bulimics are extremely normal looking. You will know the question. It'll say, they look of healthy weight. My anorexics are extremely low weight. You'll see the word amoria, like of a period. If I'm that thin, that is anorexia. And anorexia is when, if a client comes to you, that's a safety issue. So she comes to you and she's extremely thin and she has not having a period anymore. That's a safety first. Okay, that is life and death when they're that thin. You've seen pictures of anorexics; they're very, very thin. It is also egosyntonic. They don't come for treatment because they still think they're too fat. Okay, that's egosyntonic, and that is my anorexics. My bulimics, of course, they're the ones who then will eat and purge. Okay, sometimes we'll say eat and exercise. Okay, so, I'm sorry, yes, so they'll eat and they'll eat a lot, and the next day exercise excessive amount. But in the question, what I'm looking for is weight size. Okay, my bulimics are normal looking, they're normal weight. So remember that, listen to those. Okay, so then, and my rumination disorder. That is so much fun. If you've ever seen that, I suggest you YouTube it. We used to only think it happened in children. What happens is a person puts stuff in their mouth and they can't swallow, so sometimes they'll spit it back in their hand, put it back in their mouth and swallow, or swallow it in the back of their throat, pick it back up and chew it again. Now, and that is not a physical disorder. They have already gone to see a doctor, and the doctor says there's nothing physically wrong with them. So many times it is a texture disorder. There's some kind of a reason why they think they can't swallow unless they chew a couple of times. So that is a rumination disorder. Those are all under my eating and feeding disorders. Yummy. Hope you're all having breakfast now. Ugh. Okay. So then, okay. So pica, again, that is eating things that are not food, but most often associated with people who have some mild mental retardation. Bulimia is the exercise. Anorexia, you'll know because they're too thin. And rumination disorder. Okay. 61. When used in reference to an individual who is chronically at least 4 years old or mentally at least 4 years old, the term encopresis, that's my poop. Encopresis is my poop. That is all of the above. You won't see it on the test, of course, and all of the above, but it is. Okay. Voluntary expelling of fecal matter in inappropriate places. The involuntary expelling of fecal matter in, okay, the voluntary in inappropriate places, like you're purposely doing it in the wrong place, or then you are involuntarily doing it in the correct place, or just the expelling fecal material in a manner to relieve your stress and anxiety. All of those, at least 4 years old, all of those would be considered encopresis. And poop is the precis, right? Encopresis. In your resis is the P. The poop. Okay. I say this oftentimes regarding delirium and making sure we understand the difference between delirium and dementia. So 63, delirium differs from encephalopathy, which is what's going on my brain, in which of the following ways. So delirium. Remember, delirium is a really short term. So it is something that it can be a side effect of medication. It can be a toxicity with a couple of medications. So delirium is something that we usually think will go away. Okay. So the answer to 63 is D, none of the above. Okay. Look at 64. Okay. So again, long one, sorry. I'll let you look at 64. You're asked to evaluate a 17-year-old man, and on his driver's license, it appears he's 78. He's walking around in altered mental status. He appears to be senile. The social worker tries to give an MSE. It says that he is in degree confused, disoriented, forgetful, and otherwise cognitively impaired. The medical staff has notes no emergent, nothing major condition. Okay. He's not febrile. That means he doesn't have a fever, right? Septic. That means he's not poisoned. There's not nothing. Septic means like a toxic poison in your bloodstream. Okay. He has no cardiac compromise. His EKG is fine. No family can be reached. No information about prescription medication is available. The best response for the social worker is to. So you're a hospital social worker. They brought this gentleman into you. So then, we record his probable dementia and arrange for out-of-home placement. Arrange possible transportation back home with home health referral. Delay any response until the family or collateral contact can be made, or advocate for the patient to be admitted for further medical evaluation. The answer to that one is D. We're going to advocate for him to stay. Okay? So it is really, really okay for your medical social worker to disagree with the doctor. I've had students who tell me, but he's the doctor. I don't care. He's good at what he does. You are good at what you do. And at this point, this patient doesn't appear to be stable enough to go home, and we don't know where to send him to. So at least until we can find some contacts of his family, we're going to advocate to keep him in the hospital, right? Okay, so if you have a client, a question regarding the doctor and the client, your job is to support the client, not to agree with the doctor. The doctor says the patient should go to a nursing facility. The patient who is able to make his own decisions doesn't want to go. What are you going to do? My code of ethics, my self-determination says I am going to fight for that client. Okay, and if it's a first question, I'm going to try to explore and gather more information. That is my job, not to agree with the doctor, but to fight for the client. I am the very best social worker there is. And that doctor is no more a better doctor than I'm a better social worker, right? Okay. 66, chemical dependency counselor is going to counseling a 38-year-old married man regarding his ongoing use of alcohol. The client consumes alcohol on weekends, at parties, and tends to drink heavily about twice each month. At times, recovery from significant inebriation, that means being drunk, inebriation, has resulted in his being able to go to work on Monday. And on one occasion, he was given DUI, resulting in a court order counseling. The pattern of the client's alcohol use is what? Okay, so the alcohol, the DSM now has taken out many of the other categories. So this is just considered alcohol abuse. Okay, so I'm sorry, it's alcohol use. So we used to have use, abuse, and all those ones. So this is considered alcohol use. Okay. You might see a question about the difference of how, when we're looking at treating someone, so someone who has been clean for a year, okay, they can be considered in remission, of course, right? It's been treated clean for at least for a year, okay? And we determine how your level of intoxication. Your level of intoxication is determined by the amount in your system, okay? So you get a DUI based on the amount of substance, alcohol in your system. So if you see a question regarding how do you know what's the difference between, or how do we know someone is using or anything like that, it's really a matter of the alcohol in their system. And of course, I've seen this question before about how which test should we use to see how, when testing for drugs and alcohol, what stays in the body the longest, and it's the hair, okay? So if you're testing for someone and you're looking at how long it's been in their system, it's going to always be a follicle test. And for my former drug users I used to see, it doesn't have to come from your head. We can pull hair from any place and tell like how long it's been in your system, right? Because alcohol leaves your system and your bloodstream within 24 and 48 hours, depending on how much you weigh. But it does stay in your hair a lot longer than that. Okay? So again, with my alcohol and substance abuse, remember those stages of change? They're called the Transtheoretical model, but those are my stages of change. Okay. I always use this. I'm sure that nobody else in this group has ever had these issues. It was actually written for my drug users. I most often use it for myself and many of my girlfriends who have struggled with weight loss. Okay. So this theory did, again, start with drugs and alcohol, started there, but we use it for anything now. It's called the Transtheoretical model of change. So first is pre-contemplation. Pre-contemplation, again, I'm using my issue with weight, that, you know what, somebody tells me, one of my girlfriends says, wow, Pam, you know, that dress is a little tight. I'm like, no, it can't be me, the dryer, whatever. Hadn't even crossed my mind that maybe I've gained weight. Nowhere near there. Pre-contemplation is denial, denial, denial. Really don't know. Contemplation is then a couple days later and I'm laying on my bed, trying to zip my jeans. Okay, again, I know, just me. Okay, so that is when I'm really thinking, okay, Pam, I think you got a problem, right? I've been to contemplate, Pam, you know what? Yeah. Okay, so then once I realize that I have a problem, then I'm going to, this has a termination, and sometimes you'll see plan. I'm going to make a plan, right? For my substance abusers, many times, if I'm gonna see if I can get a drug treatment center, I'm gonna try to go to Alcohol Anonymous, AA, any of those things. For many of us, my people who are struggling with the food, I'm gonna start Weight Watchers, right? I'm gonna call Weight Watchers Monday morning. I'm gonna start on this great diet. I got this, right? That's my plan, okay? My action, then I'm gonna actually start on Weight Watchers, right? I'm gonna call Weight Watchers Tuesday I go up Monday morning and I get all my food for the weekend. Monday morning, I'm ready to go. Got it. I'm eating my points, counting all that good stuff. That's my action, okay? For people like me, I'm sure none of you, my action doesn't always last very long, right? I mean, I'm good. My control users are clean, for a little bit of time. And then I either maintain or I relapse, okay? So if I maintain, I'm like 20 pounds later, yeah, look at me. But most often I relapse. So when I relapse, I do not go back to pre-contemplation or contemplation. Now I know I have a problem, right? So when I relapse, I'm going to go back to either the planning or the action stage. I'm going to come with a new plan, or I'm going to do something different. Okay, so Transtheoretical model of change. Okay, so again, a long one. 67. You're in a county psychiatric emergency clinic. A social worker has been asked to evaluate a 19-year-old woman for unspecified psychotic behavior. She's accompanied by her parents who brought her to the clinic. Upon contact, it's noticed that she's disheveled, unkempt. Disheveled means her clothes are like a hot mess. Like, she slept in them, they're all wrinkled, Okay. And unkempt and grooming. Again, she's just not clean. Okay. Her hair's dirty, probably hasn't been washed. Let's see here. Episodically, she, attending to the social worker, she spontaneously claims that the worker is controlling her mind, indicates that she sees odd objects floating around the social worker, no history of drugs, and her symptoms have been prominent for the past year. Though particularly acute, that means right now they've come on strong and they've come on fast. That's what acute means, right? So acute disorder is like it comes on really strong, really fast, and many times we hope it goes away. That's acute, okay? And let's see here. Acute disorder, and she's attacked her mother, claiming that she was a clone, and she tried to pull her real mom out of the clone's body. The most likely diagnosis would be so we are going to give her schizophrenia. Okay, so again, differential diagnosis, going back to the question, how I know it's schizophrenia. Schizophrenia is most common between the ages of 17 and 45. Okay, I think one of the saddest disorders ever, because what happens, you've got this normal kid, this normal young person, they've gone away to college, they've really recently gotten married, and suddenly mom gets a phone call that they're dancing naked in the shower, dancing naked in the fountains at school or something, because they've had a psychotic break. So if you make it past the age of 45, I'm 55, I'm good. If I have one now, the chances of having a recurring one are slim to none. So if you make it to 45, you have one, you most often won't have any more. But in that 17 to 45, that's very much where we see them. And unfortunately, we don't know why. There's a genetic piece, of course, as all mental health disorders, but particularly with this one, we don't know why. We do know there's some triggers, some hormones, some things like that can cause it, but we're not really sure why. So when it comes to diagnosing, I knew it was schizophrenic because of her age, because she's having hallucinations, she's seeing things, okay, she's having delusions, those are the thoughts, and somewhere it gave me a time frame. And they've been prominent for most of the past year. Schizophrenia has to be at least 6 months, right? So I know so brief psychotic disorder is first. 3 days to 30 days is brief psychotic disorder, right? I've had a break. I've had some kind of psychotic episode. I see fire breathing dragons, something like that, right? Okay. 30 days to 60 days is schizophrenia form. It's a form of schizophrenia. Okay. So then what we know is that form of schizophrenia is we're still trying. We don't have to diagnose full-blown schizophrenia. We're trying really hard. Okay, but after 6 months, it does turn into full-blown schizophrenia. And I do know that in the question, I'm going back looking for the proof. It's schizophrenia because I see it's been a year. Okay, I'll tell you always, I'm going back to the stem. I'm looking for the information in the stem. Okay, so then my schizoaffective disorder, that is a combination of both. Bipolar 1, the full-blown manic episodes, and schizophrenia. All right, so it's a 6 months diagnosis, right? Both of those, 6 months of schizophrenia and 6 months of bipolar. So it's the more my manic episodes increase, then many times the more psychotic I become. Okay, and I can treat you with 2 types of meds. I can treat you with my schizotypals, my antipsychotics, as well as my lithium, right? So I've got someone who's going to be very heavily duty, heavy diagnosed. Okay, so when it comes to my schizophrenia, then what medications do I use? Antipsychotic, I'm going to use a Risperdal, I'm going to use a Haldol, any of those things. I also am going to many times get tardive dyskinesia. It's most common in your face, but it really does happen in all parts of your body. So my tardive dyskinesia, and I don't know if you've watched TV recently, but now they're actually addressing it on TV like it's a real thing. So tardive dyskinesia is those facial features. It is a central nervous system. It is not a physical or a motor disorder. Sometimes I'll say a muscular disorder. It is not. It is a central nervous system disorder. It's the way the medications affect your brain. What we know is, are we really true that too much medication, too much information is getting through? Okay, so the Haldol, it slows down the medication, the information that's getting through. It's in your brain, your synapses, too much information is flying over, so we try to like slow that down. It slows everything down then. And part of that side effect is then, this is my tardive dyskinesia. Cogentin is a medication that we use to treat that, Cogentin. Okay, so Cogentin stops those, or really once the client stops taking the medication, it goes away. Okay, when it comes to schizophrenia, you'll see many times questions on the DSM, questions regarding code of ethics. So the DSM, the code of ethics says, I cannot let someone go, and this is not what it says, but who's not in their right mind, right? Like if I have a client who's actively psychotic, I can't just walk away from that. However, they don't meet the criteria because they're not actively hurting themselves or hurting anybody else. So you'll see that question. So it's a bizarre one sometimes. Walk them to the emergency room. If you're in a clinic, walk them down to the psychiatrist. Don't let them go. And you can't hospitalize them involuntarily either. Okay? So just know that's a code of ethics violation. Someone who is not capable of making their own decisions. They're in a psychotic episode. As my grandmother would say, not in their right mind. You cannot let them go. Okay? So then, schizophrenia also has positive and negative effects. You'll see that sometimes also, the positive and negatives of schizophrenia. So the positives are things that you have that you shouldn't have, and the negative symptoms are the things that you are missing. So a flat affect, you often see that. Labile, that means like the emotions, the facial features do not match what's going on, what they're saying. Okay? So what you'll see then is you'll see then the positive symptoms, things that they should not have. Those are my delusions and those are my hallucinations. And they also have very disorganized speech. You'll see things like loose associations, tangential thoughts, tangential speech. You know, I began talking about, wow, you know, the sun is shining today. You know, when I was 6, the sun began to shine. And my mother, then you know what, and when the sun was shining, she began to like, and like the sentence goes somewhere really bizarre. Okay, so those are my disorganized speech, disorganized thought. In general, and most of you who've worked with schizophrenics know, in general, they're not the ones that are the most dangerous, right? Because they're so disorganized. Everything that sometimes they own is in that basket and they still can't keep it together. So that's part of the process, is that the effect that it has on their cognitions. Okay, so then the negative things are things they should have. They have a flat affect. Okay, they're missing feelings. They have reduced speech. Okay, and then also lack of initiative. So those are things that's called my negative symptoms. Those are things that they are missing when it comes to schizophrenia. Okay, so positive and negatives of schizophrenia. So we learned that we've got brief psychotic, 3 days to 30 days, you've got schizophreniform, and you've got schizophrenia, full-blown schizophrenia. So while I'm here, I'm going to go ahead and touch on those lovely then schizoaffective and schizotypical, those personality disorders, right? My schizoid. Okay. My schizoids are the ones that love COVID, right? You know them, they're your neighbors, the neighbors that you have never seen, and they probably, everyone goes, don't go trick-or-treat at their house. They're the strange ones, right? Don't go there, don't go there. I need a bigger one there. Close some windows out. I'm gonna get a picture today. Okay, if you can see the picture or not. My schizoids, they're the ones who really do not like people at all. They're the ones who are avoidant people. In the picture you see, he doesn't even like his fish. Okay? So those are the ones that are really, they don't want anything to do with anyone. Schizoid, avoid you. Schizotypals, they will talk to you and you will wish they hadn't. They're very bizarre. They're very bizarre traits and very bizarre combinations. So remember, with these personality disorders, they've been this way their whole life. You remember the kids back in elementary school that were a little strange, right? Okay, the one who didn't want to be with anybody, the one who dressed really strange. You remember those. So schizotypal are known for their bizarre thoughts and their bizarre dress. Schizoids will stay away from you. They do not like you. They don't want anything, there's nothing you. They don't want anybody. Nobody at all around. Then my avoidant personality disorders, those are the ones that do like people. However, they're afraid of being judged. Okay, so many people get a schizoid and an avoidant personality mixed up. So when you're reading those questions, remember you're looking for, are they afraid of being judged? So, you know, she was ridiculed by her siblings when she was little. And now as an adult, she's afraid to do things. That makes her avoidant, not schizoid. Schizoids just don't want anything to do with anybody. Okay, so looking for that when you're looking in those questions between my schizoids. Again, these do not have any of the psychotic features. Okay, they don't hallucinate. They are not hearing or seeing things. They really are, that's part of their personality. They've got some of the typical features of a schizophrenia, but they have not had any hallucinations or delusions. Okay? So again, as we're covering the DSM, so you know my LMSW people, you'll get kind of one of those, but you won't get near as many as my LCSWs when it comes to knowing these. Okay? So also when it comes to my personality disorder, my hallucinations, remember that there are delusions that go along with it. And if you've had me before, you know that I have a particular delusion. I suffer from erotomania. Okay, so erotomania is a delusion where you believe that someone famous is in love with you. Okay, so Barack Obama is in love with me. He doesn't quite know it yet. Though I've got 5,000 hits on the videos, surely somebody would have told them by now, right? So that is one of the ones that you really believe that someone famous is in love with you. Those are delusions. Those are in my head. That's erotomania. Okay? Grandiose. I'm not taking a political stance, but it has been said that your president sometimes is grandiose. So believing that you can do anything and that's all that matters. Okay? Jealous, persecutory, somatic. Those are types of my delusions. One of the other ones you might see are delusions of reference. A delusions of reference is based in some reality. So, like I said, since Barack is in love with me, when he's on TV, and sometimes when he, winks his eye 3 times, he's sending me a message. That's a delusion of reference because the reference is, there is some truth in there, right? He does blink. It is based in reality. However, I don't think, he is sending them to me. Some people don't think that way, but anyway, so those are my delusions. Delusions are inside my head. When it comes to my hallucinations, they're outside my head. All 5 of my senses can suffer from those hallucinations, right? I can taste things, I can smell things that don't exist. Okay, so you might see a question. Most often I've seen like people who complain that they can smell their skin rotting. Okay, so, or they always smell death. So then when it comes to those are, back to those. So I'm looking at my auditory, I'm looking at my visual, I'm looking at my gustatory, that's taste. Taste the poison. They're poisoning my food. I can taste it. That's gustatory. And then olfactory is when I smell things. So all 5 of my senses, I can hallucinate. I can have bugs crawling on me that really don't exist, right? So, okay, so all 5 of those. However, just another, so excoriation and trichotillomania, those are OCD disorders, which have nothing to do with this. But excoriation is when you're picking at your skin, okay? And not because you're psychotic, just because you're picking at your skin, it relieves anxiety. And trichotillomania, when you pull your hair, those are both OCD disorders, okay? And they're treated with an anti-anxiety, so we know. And when it comes to those medications, of course, my Prozac, my SSRIs, that's what I'm using to work with my depression, things like that. And when it comes to my anxiety disorders, then the one that I can take for a long period of time is going to be my Zoloft. It's an SSRI, but it's okay to take for an extended period of time. My benzodiazepines, that's my anti-anxieties. That is my Valium, my Valium and Xanax. Those are PRN. But if the question asks, which of those can you take over a long period of time, it's definitely going to be my anti-anxieties, my Zoloft. Okay? Okay, guys, I'm going to run to the restroom and I'm going to grab some coffee. Give me like a 5-minute break, let my dog out. I'll be back and we'll go over some other questions, okay? Okay, dokie, guys. I am back, so I'm gonna go back and share my screen. I'm gonna just stop recording just for a minute. She calls the hotline person tells her to call 911. I can tell you from my ethnic value, if my dollar locked herself in the door, I am not calling anyone. I'm getting the drill and I'm taking the hinges off, and she's not getting that door. So, that's not the answer to the question though, right? Because I need to come from the very, very narrow middle America viewpoint, what you were taught in school. So when you answer the question, stay in the question. Don't overthink it. And if you've tutored with me before, I'll tell you, stop thinking and just read. Just read. Don't, but what if? But what if? No, what if? There's a question about, what to do if someone is like the Tarasoff Act, right? If someone you have a duty to warn. So a client is sitting in front of you and the client says, I'm going to kill my husband, blah, blah, blah. What do you do? So you have to either tell the spouse or notify the police in the area. A student asked me, what if I don't know the spouse's phone number? That's not the question. Stop being a social worker and just stay in the question, and don't overthink it. I think that's the biggest part, is because we know, but what if? But what if? In this little world of the test, you have no budgetary issues. Your supervisor is amazing, and you have no worries. So stay in the test, okay? You get down to 2, and when you get to the 2 that you're down to, most often, that's the tricky part. I can get rid of 2 that don't make any sense. I've got 2 left. When I'm with my 2, I'm going to either go back to the vignette, the STEM part of it, the big wordy part, and prove it in the STEM. And if it's a word that I don't know, sometimes I'm just going to word match. If I have no idea what this means whatsoever, I'm going to look for the same word in the question. Okay? So, just if you have no idea whatsoever. And so what I get is sometimes I don't know. I've read the question, I don't know. You didn't even read the question. Sometimes you'll guess because you think you don't know. Go back to the question, take some time to figure it out, and then go back down to the bottom, the 4 choices, and rule out. Just rule out. You've got a much better chance of that than just blindly guessing, right? I've heard always choose C. No, sorry. Okay, the accept questions will kick your butt. Okay, they really will. People tell me all the time, those not questions are the hardest things ever. I try to figure out which 3 are the right ones and which one is not, okay? Or which one of these just doesn't fit. One of these is different. One of these is not like the other, right? We figure it out, okay? You do have to know content though. I cannot tell you. I've tutored people who knew how to test, but didn't know content. And that's not gonna help you. So learning how to test, what they're looking for. And all of these questions, they are looking for some of those KSAs. That's your knowledge, skills, and abilities, right? That's what they're looking for. So when I see a question, I want to know, so what do they want to know that I know? That LGBT question, they want to know, do you know that there's gender dysphoria? Do you know that gender dysphoria is not the same as your sexual orientation? That's what they want to know. If it's a code of ethics question, if it's written in there, do you know that what we do in this code of ethics? Okay? So there's some guidelines. There's some guidelines I'll give you. We assess. We acknowledge feelings. Okay? But there are no hard and fast answers. Every question is different. The way the test is written is the assumption is that we every day will see different items, right? You, as a social worker, you will never know what you run into tomorrow, right? So do you know what to do in that exact situation given these 4 choices? Okay, and of these 4 choices, which is the best, right? I never refer out, very rarely. I refer out if I've seen you naked. You came in later, okay? You watch my videos. If I've seen you naked, that's an ex, that's a spouse, that's a grandmother, that's a cousin I grew up with, that's a play cousin. I can't treat. We're too close of a relationship, okay? Other than that, very few do I refer out. I am the best social worker. If I have a problem with a client and it's this between my feelings and his feelings, I'm going to my supervisor. I'm going to seek consultation. If I'm a rural social worker, it clearly says in Code of Ethics, a rural social worker, the assumption is there is no one else, okay? So that I have to gather more information. And it is not read literature review. I know there's not a person in this room that has read a literature review unless they're still in school. Other than that, we do not read social workers, don't even pretend. That is not the answer, okay? And don't seek consultation from your peers. Unless the question says that your peers know about this, don't. Okay, you're going to seek consultation from someone outside the field. If you're in the small town, you're the only social worker. And if it's something like, gender dysphoria, and the question says you're not comfortable with it or you don't know it, then you just call the doctor. You call somebody else in the town because you're the only one that can treat. But it's not your coworkers unless the question clearly says that your coworkers have this information. Okay? So back to my questions. Anything else before I go on? We're going to do another 45 minutes and then go to questions again at the end, okay? Again, it is recorded, so make sure that you have to send me an email to get a copy of this recording. And please do give me like 24 hours. I still have group tonight, okay? I have questions all afternoon. I have group. I have my NCE group tonight. Okay, so I did some DSM stuff. I want to cover some, and I did some ethnic diversity, the ones that many people never read. Okay, remember when you're taking the test, there are 170 questions, so you really only need like a C to pass. Okay, I really don't like that though. I think that if you're doing a test, you should get yes. My email is drpam2020@gmail.com. It should be up at the top of the chat box if you go back to the top. Yeah, it's Dr. Pam 2020. It's Dr. Pam. I'm sorry if I didn't put it in there. It's Dr. capital D PAM 2020@gmail.com. If you're one of my regulars, like, that is not the email she gave me, use this one for me, okay? This makes it easier for me to send out a mass, okay? Okay, so then, diversity we've talked about the interviewing techniques, we've gone some of the DSM stuff. Let me give you a couple more DSM. We're gonna pick up some community questions as well, okay? There are a few research questions also. There's usually about 4 or 5. I suggest, go back and look for one of my videos on social work and research. They're easy and they're worth not leaving those points off the table. Whenever I see on Facebook that somebody missed by 2 points, I'm thinking if you just read those research questions, because many of those don't even bother with those, right? And if I could tell you that they're easy, they really are. Okay, so we are looking at number 74, okay? She's a social worker is called to a medical clinic to evaluate a 56-year-old woman who presents with the persistent fears and new diagnosis of melanoma. Melanoma is like a skin cancer, guys. Okay, so 2 years since that time, she's become intensely preoccupied with the status of her skin. Tends to check and recheck every blemish that occurs. Frequent visits to dermatologists have not resulted in the identification of any new dermatological problems. And despite reassuring, her worries continue unabated. That means she's still consistent, continuing to worry. Okay. Just closing out some windows here, guys. So if you came in late also, remember that is my diagram. That's what I use. Okay, there's that social work problem solving method that you use, that you were taught day 1 in that methods class. Okay, so I think I put a copy of that in the chat box. If not, I will. But that is what I swear by. Okay, back to that question. Oops, not that one. Back to that question. So these are all considered somatic form disorders. Soma means body. That's a Latin root body, my body, right? So somatic disorders are when my mental health, right? Something's going on, my emotional health, my mental health is going on, and I am, sorry, my dog is chewing. And it's coming out as a physical approach, right? So I have to figure out physically what is going on. Okay, So it is, remember, if you have one of those, that you have gone to the doctor first. So if you get one of those questions, refer to medical care. It's not going to be the answer because you've already, give a poor dog a bone. So you've already gone to the doctor. Okay, so then malingering is faking it, right? I'm trying to get something out of it. That is malingering. Factitious disorder is truly faking it. We're not really sure why. An illness anxiety disorder is that I have an illness. For example, my daughter very much has anxiety, and many times she has a stomach ache. That's an illness anxiety disorder. And somatic symptom disorder, that's kind of that broad category of having those somatic symptoms, but not really sure what. In that same category as a conversion disorder, the difference between a conversion disorder and these disorders is the conversion disorder has to have something traumatic happen, right? I saw my kid I saw somebody get hit by a car. I heard something awful. The old term was hysterical blindness. So there's something wrong. I can't see, I can't walk. Something happens because of this traumatic emotional event. So that's a conversion disorder. The conversion disorder is a central nervous system disorder. So they really, really can't see. But again, all of those, they've gone to the doctor first. Another thing I want to pick up with you is, so my factitious disorder has primary and secondary gains. Okay, and this is probably more an LCSW question. Okay, so, but primary and secondary gains are what I'm getting from this order. A primary gain, you may not see. Okay, primary gain may be something that's on the inside that it's not clear to anyone else what the primary gain is from this illness. The secondary gain is then when you can see what my benefit is. I'll give you a picture there. Let me just go back and touch on that. So I did talk before about anything that's Freud. Remember, Freud believed everything was on the unconscious. All of your defense mechanisms, except for suppression, are unconscious choices, okay? Suppression and repression. The difference is repression. Pam was abused by her father when she was little. She's having difficulty in her marriage relationship and doesn't know why. That's repression. I've repressed it. Suppression is Pam is having difficulty in her marital issues. She knows that her father molested her, but chooses not to deal with it. Okay, back to that one. So then your subconscious, your unconscious, everything's in there, of course. Freud's job was to bring the things from the unconscious to the conscious. The TAT and the Rorschach I mentioned earlier. Subjective, projective, okay. And then your preconscious are things you could recall easily if you tried. If I ask you your first phone number, if I ask you your first boyfriend, things like that, you could recall if you tried. And of course, your conscious is very little, and that's just the part that Freud would say that's the decisions that you make every day. Okay, and again, all my defense mechanisms are in there. When you're looking on the test, anything psychodynamic, psychoanalytic, anything unconscious is always going to be a Freud answer. Okay, so Freud said, well, in general, there's secondary and primary gains to having these disorders. So then, this kind of goes through them, and I'll put this in the chat box as well. Okay. Okay, so my primary gains are things that we cannot see. You're not really sure why the person is getting it, what they're getting from it. The secondary gain, they're obvious. Okay, so the doctor's attention, the husband comes back because the child is now sick. It's obvious what the secondary gain is. It's something we can see. There's also a tertiary gain, and a tertiary gain is when like the whole family or group of people gain from this one person having the illness. Okay, so if we look at like the mothers who pretend their children have cancer, we've seen those, right? They show their kids and give their kids medication to make the kids appear if they have cancer. Okay, so sometimes that's like Munchausen by proxy, right? Where the mother's getting attention from that. So a primary gain, of course, would be whatever mom feels on the inside. The secondary gain is that the doctors think she's amazing. She saves the child every time. The tertiary gain is that the community gathers money so the whole family can go to Disney World. So that one affects a lot more than that one person. That's a tertiary gain. So those happen in those somatoform disorders. Okay, so malingering, again, I am getting something out of it. A lawyer brings his client to you, and the client suddenly has depression. You meet with the client, and the client cannot recall any symptoms of depression. That is malingering. He's trying to get out of it. Okay. So what was the answer on that one? This is my baby. Okay, so number 75. I'm going to skip 75. You guys are going to pick that up. Dissociative disorder. You're going to see that most often a question might be like you have a client who has suffered some kind of sexual or physical abuse. The question might say they're sitting there during the day and they're daydreaming. It's hard to get their attention back. If you remember the movie Precious, whenever she was being sexually abused, that's when it cut to the scene where she was off with, dancing with her handsome young man. That's a dissociative disorder. It used to be multiple personality. Now it is just dissociative disorder. Let's see here. Okay, let's pick up some of our our theories here. Look at 86. There's strong empirical evidence that the therapeutic approach in the treatment of depression should be that is CBT and medication, okay? So anytime you have a mood disorder, research says the most effective treatment is going to be CBT and medication, okay? '87. A client comes to a social worker citing problems when choosing a career. Working collaboratively, the social worker assists in clarifying the problem, identifying outcome goals with specific steps to engage and achieve the goals, and conclude by feedback and evaluation of client progress. From this process, it is clear the model of intervention best used can be described as what? So you're going to go back to the question. You're going to rule out what it can't be. So do remember, when it's a behavioral therapy, my behavior therapist could care less about your feelings. That's never going to be close to an option of how do you feel. The goal is just to stop the behavior, okay? So they're called radical behaviors. You wouldn't say on the test, but those are people who just believe if I cut off your fingers, you'd stop stealing, right? We don't have to discuss it. We don't have to talk about it. We just give you consequences every time that you break the rules, right? I certainly would stop. Okay. We know that DBT is the one that works best with my borderline personality. Okay, so I see nothing in that question at all about any feelings. Okay, so then my reality therapy, again, that's called choice therapy. That would only be an LCSW question. You wouldn't see that on the LMSW. Okay, but I do know it's solution focused. Okay, she's given particular goals to work on. So remember, solution focused, that's the one where I'd use the miracle question. Okay. That's CBT. Okay. Okay, number 93, using a couple with significant conflict issues, a number of hot point issues begin to emerge. In the void of taking sides, a social worker is preventing two. Okay. So 93, she's seeking to prevent triangulation. Okay, remember, triangulation is one of my family theorist terms. That's going to go to, that's my structural family therapy. So structural family therapy suggests there's a hierarchy and boundaries. That's where enmeshment and disengagement come in. Families that are too enmeshed, that's where we see more incest, like, yucky, 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 right? Okay, triangulation is when there are two people who are fighting and they bring in a third party to try to decrease the fighting between the dyad. Whether that's the kid getting sick at school, the mother calling his mother, any of those things is when you bring in that third person, that's triangulation, okay, in the family model. Now you will also see triangulation when you're using collaterals or a research question, because triangulation also means gathering 3 different research points. So if you're looking, if you're using collaterals is when you're like collecting evidence from other people about this family, you often want to triangulate. So the mother says she took the kids to the doctor. So I want to check with the doctor, I want to check with the school, and then as well as what the mother said, right? That's triangulation also. So just be sure that, now there's 2 different meanings of those terms. Okay, so don't see it and go, wait, that can't be it. That's only a family term. Okay, but no, this is definitely a structural family term. Like in structural family, what you're going to see, again, it's the hierarchy. If little Johnny Jones is having trouble at school and it's using a structural family approach, the assumption is that Johnny's mom and daddy are not in charge of the home. Okay, so we got to come back, we've got to set up the home. I've got a really good video out there. It's just on the family, different types of family therapy. If you just go to Academic Changing for World Coaches on YouTube and look, it talks about the difference between structural, systemic, which is the big one, right? And then structural and strategic, that's below. Structure is the boundaries, the enmeshment, all those good things. Strategic, I'm using words like the double bind. The double bind is when you tell a kid to do something. You tell a kid, you better not use drugs, and then a few months later, you're asking for the rent money. That's a double bind. That's a communication technique that works, that's dysfunctional in families, right? Okay, paradoxical directives. Paradoxical directives is the family comes in and they've been fighting and fighting and fighting. The therapist says, stop fighting. They go on to keep doing it. She gives them all these techniques. They keep doing it. Then she says, fine, go ahead and just fight it out. That's a paradoxical directive. Again, those are under my strategic therapy techniques. So strategic therapy in general, I think about it's the chess game, the checkers game, right? The family does this, you do this. The family does this, you do this. In the structural approach, that's where the therapist joins the family. He tries to have an alliance with one of the family members. That's going to be a structural approach. And systems, of course, is that everything functions as a system. My eco map would be under my structural approach. I'm sorry, my systems approach. Okay, look at 96. Okay, so this I definitely know is in APGAR. It's called the roles we play. So they're role discomplementary or role complementary or role reversal. Role reversal is that when the kids really, the kid becomes the parent and the parent becomes the kid. That's role reversal. Role complementary are when the roles complement each other. Okay, so 96 is A. They are complementing each other. This complementary would be my secretary's been my secretary forever and suddenly I ask her to start babysitting my kid. So my complementary roles do complement each other. They align.
Hello.
Go back to our question.
Nikki and Jenna, are you guys ready? I can take you.
Oh, somebody needs to mute themselves. Sorry? Mute yourself.
I can hear you.
I haven't had meeting with the truck today. It's not on my schedule.
I thought you are just not eating dinner.
I really don't want to know all your business. I'm not sure who it is.
Yeah.
There we go. Gotcha. Okay. Number 94. I use this term a lot, and I don't think we've seen it in a question. So in communications or experimental therapy, it's often actually one that you're going to use in strategic or systems approach. The idea that the same results can be secured in different ways is referred to as, that is called equal finality. Okay, so I say to you all the time, if you've been in my groups or with me, that at one point we'll all be licensed social workers, correct? So that is equal finality. We've taken different routes to get here. We've taken different times in our lives to get here, but at one point we'll all be the same place, and that term is called equal finality. Okay. In number 93, in seeing a couple with significant conflict issues, a number of hot points continue to emerge. Oh, we did that already. That was triangulation. I want to talk to you about emotional cutoff, though. So D, emotional cutoff, that is a Bowen term, right? Bowen did my genogram with the generations when that mean professor made you do genograms. So emotional cutoff or differentiation is to stop repeating those patterns. So an emotional cutoff, you can actually still be physically in the family, but emotionally cut off. Differentiation is when you are truly just making different. You're choosing to live your life different than your family members. One of the things that with my very young students that I teach is, asking who they're voting for. And not that I really care, but just to kind of see where they get those decisions from. And so many times they'll tell me that's because that's what my mom and dad did. Okay, and that's certainly what we don't want to do. We want to make our own decision and differentiate from our mom and dad. Okay, 100, we're going into some community questions. Okay, so in general, in community, and this book actually has a pretty good definition of community. So there are four different methods of community, and there are 4 different stages. So the 4 methods are locality development. That is, if you're looking for the term consensus, everybody gets along, we love each other, we're homogeneous, we all look alike. That's locality development, okay? They're getting together because they don't want the prison in their town. The second one then, if the locality development doesn't work and I don't see consensus in the question, then I have to go to some social planning models. So we socially plan, we act, and then we're hoping for reform. So in those questions, you're always fighting for the blacks, the browns, the underclass. They don't have the power, they don't have the say-so. You don't live in the community, and the community knows what's best for them. Okay, so you're fighting for the community is your client. So again, APGAR is pretty good on those, and I do have a couple of videos, and I probably am tutoring on that in probably one of my Saturday groups, see all that in detail. But there are 4 levels. There are also then 4 stages. So when you're doing community development, there's 4 stages. The first one is going to be orientation. You introduce yourself to the community because you don't live there. You don't have a dog in this fight, right? You live on the other side of the town in your little nice cush neighborhood, and you're fighting for the people that live here. So orientate yourself to the group. And then, of course, there's going to be some storming, some fighting. We don't want to do this. We don't want to do that. We want to do this. And then we're going to emerge, come together as a group, and then go out and reinforce whatever the group decides. An example of that is real life, real day, especially with the George Floyd riots going on. So there was lots of, we didn't just wake up one day and the whole country was marching, right? We didn't just wake up one day and Black Lives Matters was written on the concrete. All those social planning things are things that we didn't see that went underneath. And if you're any of the people who were marching in the room, your Facebook was lit up, or whoever you met with your groups was lit up. Let's meet here, let's meet there, let's do that, let's do this. So all of that is what the social locality development, what community development would look like with the planning stage. So when you see in the question that they're gathering information, or they are doing research, all of those are going to be the planning stage, and the action stage is when you'll do those things. One of the things, especially in the African American community, when the laws haven't always been there, or the majority of people haven't been there, most of the changes we've seen have been through community action and helping for community reform. So when John Lewis died a few months ago, and one of the things that in reading his memoirs, he talked about the plan. That they were taught to always have like a quarter in their pocket, how to protect their heads. All of those things were planning things, because the action was they were going to walk across the bridge, and knowing when they walked across the bridge, that was going to happen. But of course, the goal was reform. So social reform is the goal. Action is then what happens. Social workers are not afraid to use negotiation. We're not afraid to direct power. You know, we support the community. There's power in numbers, right? Power in numbers. So, and like I said before, enabler is a good thing in the community. So if you look at 100, we do everything but B. We are not a legal advisor. Just as I missed that day in medical school, I also missed that day in law school, right? We don't give medical advice. Okay. 101, I like this question. Given that social workers are generally trained to work with voluntary clients, it can be difficult to work with those that are involuntary. Okay? I can use all of these things, coping mechanisms of resistance by involuntary clients include all of them. Okay, so before you answer that again, more info. So remember, we're going to treat involuntary clients the same way as we treat voluntary clients. The Code of Ethics says they have a choice, right? So if he does not want to participate, then I am going to tell him that that is his choice, and then I'm going to maybe remind him of the consequences. But I'm not going to remind him of the consequences first, okay? I'm going to say, well, you know, little Bobby Joe, if you don't participate, this will happen. I'm not doing that. I'm not doing that. He has got the freedom of choice, okay? There are consequences, not necessarily imposed by me, but there are going to be consequences. And if it's court ordered, one of the things you're always going to look for in that question is making sure that you document, because it is court ordered. If the court said, that means you answer to the court, okay? So it might say that you remind Johnny that, you know, the court has this. If Johnny refuses to sign a release of information, I'm going to acknowledge that to Johnny, but I'm still going to let him know that I am court ordered. That's only if the question states that. Mom and dad are going through a divorce, and dad has custody of the child, okay? Mom calls and mom wants records. Do not send mom back to dad. They're getting a divorce, obviously. This isn't working out, okay? My answer is I'm going to tell mother that I can't share, but most often on that question, it says put it in writing, because I am court ordered and I am bound by the court to do what that says, okay? So my involuntary clients, I'm still going to treat them with the utmost dignity and respect, but if it says that I'm ordered by the court, I'm going to remind them that their informed consent doesn't really matter. And I'll tell the judge that the client refused to sign a release. Judge is going to say, oh, that's nice and all, Pam, but let's get started. Okay. Since we're there, let me go ahead and go over the court order and the subpoena and all that good stuff again and again and again. So a court order, anything from the court, a order or a subpoena means I am showing up. When I do go to jail, and I'm not saying I won't, but if I do go to jail, it's going to be for something I did. And you won't be surprised. It'll be like on the paper, like big, like, oh my gosh, Pam did that? Yes, she did. I'm not going because I refuse to answer a subpoena. That's a warrant. And they'll issue a bench warrant if you don't show up for your subpoena. So the Code of Ethics says I'm going to protect my client. I'm going to protect my client, protect my client. So remember, the only things I share is if my client is in imminent danger of hurting himself or someone else. So if my client comes into me and he says, well, Dr. Pam, you know, I killed my wife about 6 months ago. I'll say, well, wow, thank you, Bob, for sharing. And we're going to go from there. If it's the first question, I'm probably going to just ask him more questions, right? But I cannot share that. No one is in imminent danger. I cannot share that. I'm going to, of course, put that in my notes. One thing also is associated with LCSWs, you can have a separate set of psychotherapy notes that do not exist unless someone specifically asks for them. Okay, so that's most often on the clinical exam, but a separate set of psychotherapy notes. So then, if I get subpoenaed, I'm going to, and subpoena is me showing up, okay? So I'll get subpoenaed to court. I'm going to show up to court. I'm going to have the records, the file, not my therapy notes, because it didn't say that. And I'm not going to mention that I have them either. Unless they specifically ask for them or a client specifically asks for them, they are mine. Okay, then I'm going to show up and I'm going to say, Your Honor, this is privileged information. When Johnny, Bobby, Becky, Mike told me this, they really had no idea that this would be in court. It was a privilege for them to share it with me, and I do not want to share. Please drop the record. Just drop the search. I don't want to share. That's when I claim privilege. Privilege is only in court. I do not use it in any other question. It's confidentiality in when I work with my client, but in court it's privilege communication. And then I'm going to say is, Your Honor, please just don't make me share. Just make it go away. And he's going to say, stop, Pam. Let me back up for that. I'm going to ask him first. I'm going to say, Johnny, Bobby, Ricky, Mike, can you sign a release for me so I go to court? Does it matter what he signs or not? Does not. So showing up to court, I'm going to try everything I can to not share those records. Okay, and then the judge is going to say, tough, bam, start to talking. And even then, I'm going to share as minimal as I can. And then I'm going to ask the judge to please seal the records. So narrow the scope, narrow the scope. Just look at that one time. I've been seeing Johnny, Bobby, Mike for 12 years. Just look at that one time where he killed his wife. Don't look at all the records. Ask him to narrow the scope. Then I'm also going to ask him please to seal the records. Okay, all court records that are done in open court, that little transcription is there. You know what? That becomes public record. So in general, as a good social worker, I think you should always ask your clients to make sure they ask for their records to be sealed, especially in divorce situations, because you don't want kids later to go back and kind of read those. You just don't, but that's the personal opinion. It won't be on the test. But in general, those are the steps if you're court ordered. Now, if you get an order from if you get a court order from, if you get a subpoena from the attorney, that's a birthday party invitation. You check with your client, hey, you know, when you and your husband were married, they want records. You want to share? She's going to say no. And I'm going to say, well, by the way, we're not coming. Okay. Respond. The answer is to not respond is just rude. As a professional courtesy, we're going to respond and say thank you that we're not coming now, but we will respond. A question has come up recently that I've seen a couple times people have difficulty with is the issue of adoption. Okay, so if the adoption records were sealed or unsealed, those are always you're going to seek legal counsel, because a client was adopted from this agency and now she's an adult and she wants her records. It depends on what the terms were when the child was adopted. So that depends on each agency's terms or to seek legal consultation. Okay. Any questions on those? Okay. So I'm going into some supervision questions. Again, those are many times for my LCSWs. I've seen some of the LNSW as well, though. Actually, someone last week told me there are quite a few supervision questions on the LMSW. So the primary purpose of supervision, of course. Okay, this one is B, is meeting the client's individual needs. So it's always about the client. You go to supervision for your client. You keep notes for your client. You have a code of ethics for your client. So it really is making sure that as a supervisee, that you're making sure that your client's needs are met. Okay.
Dr. Pam, what was the answer for 101? I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, 101 was humor. The client is not going to use humor as a resistance. They don't want to be there. They're not using humor. Okay. 102 is B. And again, in general, remember the goal is to make sure that we meet the client's needs. So when you're the question, sometimes it'll say in order meeting. What does it say? In adherence with the office policy or following the office rules, what is the goal of supervision or what is the goal of whatever? If it talks about the agency, remember that answer is going to be about the agency's rules, making sure that we follow the agency's policies if that's in there. So I'm looking for a question to talk, the answer looks like yes, helping the client, but yes, making sure that we follow the agency's rules, okay? The mission statement is just what we do. Okay, that is what this agency does. So if a question talks about you're relooking at the mission statement for the future, if you're addressing a new mission statement, you're gonna look back and say, hey, what was wrong with the last one? Okay, if the question is about putting a program forward that hasn't occurred yet, they ask you to evaluate what the outlook of COVID will be. You can't evaluate the outlook of COVID. You have to go back and see like, wow, we changed policies or what happened prior to that. We can't go forward many times in those community and the agency questions until you go back. So there's a difference between community questions and agency questions. They're both indirect, but the community questions talk about you working with the people. The agency questions are more on how we run an agency, okay? That's where you'll see my X and Y terms of management. So 104, okay? So I'm gonna just go over X and Y. The answer to 104 is D, but I don't think that would be on the test. It's a structuralist approach, and I haven't seen that one on the test. most often what you're going to see is you're going to see your XY or your bureaucratic method. My X and Y theories of management are the most popular. Okay. So my X is called the scientific method. That's been around forever and forever. You show up for work, you put your little parts together, and you do as you're told, right? You do exactly as you're told and smile and have a good day. That's most often what we're going to see in, like in this area, we have a Volkswagen plant, right? In the Volkswagen plant, your job is to put the whatever on the whatevers, right? So that's what you're going to do. That's your job. You show up and do as you're told. I'm going to ask you how you feel about that. But it's extremely effective. The cars get made really, really quickly, right? That's the scientific method. That's the one that's been around the longest. The Y theory of method is called the humanitarian. So always remember, my clients do not like the X, the people, the employees, we don't like the X. Make us do, no. We like the Y, yay! Okay, the Y is a humanitarian. The Y is that the staff gets a lot of say-so and it's supported by the management, right? So the problem with that though is I am sure none of you have been those social workers, but I have been in meetings with social workers where it took all day to make a decision. Oh my gosh. Okay, so that is my Y theory. The management supports the staff decisions. It is staff, they're happier, it's humanitarian approach. Yay, look at us. But work gets done the slowest. The other one, of course, is Weber's bureaucracy. You'll see that one also. That bureaucracy, that is that red tape, right? I work for, I teach college full time. I work for a state institution. Excuse me, and in the state institution, if I want to get a new computer, I can't just go over to Best Buy and buy it from there. That'd be like too easy, right? I lost that. I have to go through the channels. So I have to go and ask everybody, to get their permission. And 5 years later and $5,000 later, then I'm actually able to finally get a computer. Okay. When you're looking at the bureaucracy method, one of the things in general is you're going to really, really make sure that you follow the chain of command. So when you're looking at those questions, you really might get a question that talks about the same with the code of ethics. So you have a client in front of you, and the client reports that you've been subpoenaed. You've been subpoenaed by the courts. If you work for an agency, you're going to go up the chain of command. If it starts off, you work for an agency, one of the things you're going to do is you're going to make sure that you go to your boss. Can you imagine if you go to court and you haven't gone to your boss yet? So remember those. We're looking for that Weber's theory of bureaucracy. We're going up the chain of command. Okay, that's just really important to remember that. You'll see those types of questions. Let me go ahead and talk about also top down, bottom up, those budgeting questions. Everybody knows those? So if I am doing top down budgeting, what that means is the money is coming from the senior management often. The money comes down, it's top down, then middle management or group leaders are told how to spend, or they're told how to spend the money. Okay. Bottom up is when I work for the state of Georgia, so we do bottom up management. So what happens is I put in my request for budget, right? And then it goes up from me, it goes up to my managers, up to the top. So that's bottom up management style. Okay, top down, and those are financial terms. So bottom up, top down. Also in there, you'll see zero based. Okay, zero based means I ain't got no money. Zero base is what my bank account looks like sometimes. The assumption is when you're starting a new agency, or if it's at the end of your fiscal year, you really just might not have any money. Okay, if it's grant money, soft money, things that haven't come in yet, then your agency really may start off with zero based. So zero based funding, you have no money. For my full-time jobs, my budget comes in. My budget is cut off at the 1st of June. We don't get new budget until like the middle of July. They have to title up all the fiscal stuff. So I won't get new budget until July 15th-ish. During that time, I have a zero-based budget. I don't have any money, okay? But I know that's happening every year in my agency. So what we do is we stock up, we buy up. If I need services, I need something goods, all that good stuff. I have a business trip before COVID to take during that time. I planned it out when I had budget. It's coming in, I know I won't have any budget. Okay. 105. Okay. So cost benefit, cost analysis. Again, these are an APGAR, and actually this book is a really good description if you don't know those. Cost benefit is I've given you money and I expect to make money. Okay. The example I usually give is like you have the good hospitals in your area and you have the PO hospitals in your area, right? In the good hospitals, you really are able to, people put money in the hospital, right? You've got the best equipment, you've got the best stuff. And in the other side, the poor hospital, the indigent care hospital, most often it's just enough tax dollars to get by. Cost benefit is I want to make money. I put money in this, the hospital expects to make money. They've got the best surgeons, they've got the best equipment, their goal is to make money. Cost effectiveness, the people on this side, the cost effectiveness just means they're trying to make sure they got the most bang for their buck. So at the end of your year, you're doing your calendar, you're looking back over your year. Cost effectiveness, did you do what you were supposed to do? If your goal was to slow down teen pregnancy, if your goal was to do any of those things, how effective was it? Okay. You'll see summative and formative. My formative review is always when you're forming the agency, when you're forming the policy. You got this big old fund of money, you got grant money, and you're trying to figure out how to do it or set your goals for it. So it's going to be formative, okay, while it's still in the middle, and it's going to be summative at the end. So if you see a question that your agency had this great agency plan, this it worked out well, another agency wants to borrow your plan, that's going to be called a summative, the summary of how it worked. Okay, those are only agency questions. One of the other things you'll also see is if you're doing research on an agency, research in your agency, you can only do quasi-experimental. You cannot do a full experiment with people who don't know. Quasi means it is not randomized. So you'll often see those terms, and the answer, if it's an agency, and you're looking to do a research program in your agency, the only ethical one is going to be a quasi-experiment. And all that means, again, is they are not randomized. Okay? You'll see things like line item, like how you budget your budget, those agency questions. You gotta make sure you stay in the line. That's what it means. So above the line and below the line. The line is, that is where I have to pay my personnel. I have to pay for all of these things that we plan for. Above the line are things that we didn't intend for, okay? And then below the line are things that we would like to have. So again, that's pretty much how you run your home as well. Like you cannot go shopping and not pay your mortgage this month because it's stuck in that line. It's line item budgeting. Let's see here. There are a couple of research questions on there. Most often you'll see that single subject design. That's my AB. Okay. Baseline, intervention, baseline. That's what you're going to see most often. That's when you thought research was hard. That is not an agency question. Now, you do not do that with an agency. You'll do that with a single person.
Professor, I have a question.
Uh-huh.
Is there any way that you could share with us, or at least with me, this information that I could go over it more,
So you're going to send me a request to my email, and you'll get the video and the book.
Okay.
Okay. So it's drpam2020@gmail. Okay. So it won't, I can promise you it won't be like next hour. I'm sorry, I'm tutoring all afternoon, but I will get it out today. But yeah, and this book does a really good job of explaining these. And also I know I'm going fast because I'm running out of time, but you can always slow it down and go back and listen to it over and over again. And the goal is when you see these in other study areas, now you'll think, oh yeah, I've heard that before. So my AB design, so the most common one is ABA. That's intervention, baseline intervention. I'm going to replicate it by doing an AB design, okay, which is taking a baseline. I'm going to then put in my intervention, go back and take a baseline, and then sometimes I'm going to go back and then do another intervention, okay? I've seen the question of what does it look like backwards? It's still ABA, right? It's still a single subject design. It's a single person, a single item. It is not for research though. I mean, not for agency research. You're working with a group of clients, you're working with a single client, that's what you would use it for. Okay, the rest of these questions really go down into like my code of ethics. And really, those are so important. If I could tell you, know those that are interwoven between all of the questions. There's nothing in the code of ethics really specifically about gifts, okay? What we know is what it says is we really can exploit the client. We do have to take into effect all of those cultural considerations. So a substantive, a huge gift, a large monetary gift, no, okay? There's a question out there about the guy who paints the, he paints a picture of the lady's dog, the therapist's dog, and gives it to her. And can she take it or not? And back in the question, it says that he is a famous artist. He's an acclaimed artist. Okay, no, you can't take that. That's expensive because whether you want it or not, it's just your dog. If he's a famous artist, that painting is worth a lot of money. Okay, so when it comes to the questions, prove it in the question. Go back to the question and tell me how you know. Okay, know your content, but go back in the question and say, wow, I know this because, I can see this because. Okay. Always assess. That means gather as much information as you can before you make an intervention. Assess. And what I see many times with people that I tutor is we know the answer because we've seen these people, this type of client 1,000 times, right? We know the answer, but it doesn't work that way. The test is going to treat every client as an individual, every situation as an individual. And the test is really known for the practice questions we all see. You might see some of them similar on the test, and you think, oh yeah, I read that last week, I know what to do, and they didn't ask you the same thing. So if I could tell you, my advice is always stay in the question. Prove it to me in the question. No content, but know how to apply it. Don't just know surface value of content. Know what it really means. Then go back when you're answering the questions. Safety first, always safety. If it's full of feelings, the client comes in, the husband says, I want to divorce her, and he keeps talking and she's crying. First thing you do is acknowledge her feelings. She's crying. Don't ask her what she thinks. She's crying. Acknowledge those feelings. They're angry. They're mad. The client is court-ordered. He doesn't want to be there. He comes in and he is angry. Acknowledge his feelings. He deserves that, right? Okay. And then we're going to assess. That means gather more information. That means make sure I've done everything I can before I do an intervention. Okay? Get paid to be nosy. So I'm going to be sure that I send this to you, and I'm going to let you guys go if you want to go. I'm going to stop recording just for a second. Okay, let's stop sharing.